Will come to order on Thursday, October 1st, around 7. We will first do a couple of bond releases, and then we will move into the public hearing. So, Gene, 107 Campion Road.
They actually have requested to move to the next agenda. I had requested some replacement of landscaping at the site that did not survive the summer, so he is going to replace it and will request again at the next meeting.
Next meeting, okay, that's easy. The Glade, Great Lake Lane.
Yep, so Tom Sirico is here to request
Okay.
a partial release of his roadway bond.
So, what do we need to know? Or we'll let Mr. Zarico speak.
Well, hopefully some of you folks have been out there to see the condition of the site. It's really looking good. We're looking for releases of the road shoulders, which is an $8,000 component of the $33,000 bond, and the street trees, which is, I think, a $3,000 component. The road shoulders are part of the low-impact design drainage system, and so those were all done. They were sodded. They're deeply rooted already. They've been in there for 3 or 4 months, and they're fully established. So it's really just those areas of the right-of-way extending beyond the pavement that this relates to.
Okay.
I conferred with Tim Willett in the DPW. He agrees with the amount. He submitted the amount of the $11,000.
So it's 11,000 reduction in the bond and the site opening bond?
Tom is also requesting the site opening bond, and that's independent of Tim Willett. That would be up to you. The street's constructed, the access is fully completed.
Yeah, all of our facilities are in. I mean, really, you know, I had requested that be rolled into that street bond previously, and it wasn't. I thought it was reasonable to ask for that bond because we really don't have that much to do. There's really just a finished coat of pavement.
So do we have enough money to cover all the remaining work? That really is the question.
Yep.
And if we do, then we should release that
We do
as well.
within the roadway bond.
Okay.
And I had discussion with Tom. The only outstanding issue in the decision is the homeowners agreement hasn't been submitted yet. Tom said he would work on that and get that to us. But that's kind of contingent upon before a CO can be issued, the homeowners would need to be in place.
I think we still need to deal with the cul-de-sac too.
You do.
I'm prepared to talk about that for a real short time if you want to tonight. You know, as you know, we've had, I think in the decision that was written something to the effect of a discussion would be had by town planner and developer on site. That's been a little bit challenging. Obviously, we've had 5 transitions in the last year. We never actually had a site visit for that because of some of the I guess instability in that position. I've gone through and come up with a plan for that cul-de-sac island if, in fact, the board wants us to put an island in there. You know, I have mixed emotions about it. We had this discussion before. DPW definitely does not like to see the islands because of the complexity with plowing. Fire prefers not. I know this board prefers, I assume, to have an island when it's feasible. And what I've come up with, looking at the other islands that I've seen around town, some of which I've built, some like in your neighborhood, John, that seem to be functioning and with relatively little maintenance issue to take care of. I thought that in this 80-foot paved cul-de-sac, if we put a 25-foot island in the middle, that would leave 27.5 feet on either side for the full paved access way, which is very similar. In your neighborhood, it's 28 feet. In Carter Field, it's actually 25 feet. So I think that's a good balance, a little bit more than in Carter Field because that does get tight sometimes. They've got a big island that we put in out there. And in terms of the profile, I don't think it should be a raised island. The raised islands tend to be much drier. They also require a curbing. Because of the low-impact design that we have, we don't have curbing. Curbing would look a little odd out there. I think the design should be level with the finished pavement, and it should be planted with either a dozen viburnum or something to that effect that'll survive in the dry conditions. And
Any questions?
I do have a letter to that effect describing that if you'd like to have it. I don't think it should be done until we're about to put in the finished pavement, though, because, with delivery trucks, with large, heavy equipment, if we put an island in now, it's just going to get destroyed in the course of the rest of the construction.
No, I've been out there a few times, and boy, the house past the bridge looks great.
What's the thought process with an island?
The thought process with the island is it's an amenity for the people that live there, and it's an amenity for the town, because what you do is you break up that big mass of open space. So, yeah,
Do you like yours in your
I
neighborhood?
love mine.
Okay. All right. I don't have
honestly,
one.
I went around to all of the islands that I was aware of, that being one of them, and that does seem like a relatively easy to take care of situation there. And I think because it isn't raised, a little bit more natural precipitation does stay there and nurture the growth that's there. Because you don't want to have mechanical devices in an island, you don't want to have irrigation, you don't want to rely on that.
And John, if it is level with the roadway, in the event of a public safety emergency with fire department or whatever, they just go right over it. So,
Yeah.
They'll go right over.
yeah. No, I'm saying, he said the fire department prefers not to have them, but if it's level, well, DPW and fire, but if it's level,
Yeah, you could go right through
that's
it
right.
if you had to.
If you had to in the case of an emergency.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the level design makes sense as well. I mean, the other thing, I don't think it's sensible, because of all of these things we're talking about, to plant street trees in there that are going to grow to some size, because those can't be worked around, really. I had explained in this summary that I was intending to put a large fieldstone in the center of that island. That kind of goes against the ability to, I guess, run that through, but we have two really large, nice-looking boulders out there. One of them would really look nice in the middle of that
Yeah, I
cul-de-sac.
mean, yeah, you could probably be okay with that.
Yeah.
Now, just curious, when you say level, are you going to put any border around it at all to
No.
keep mulching? Or, so if there's a heavy rain, it'll wash out, or?
Well, if it's
Are you
level,
gonna
it's
do it-
not,
are you gonna-
there's nothing to feed it. There's no runoff feeding towards it. In fact, John can probably even speak to that in
We've
his
never
neighborhood.
had a problem. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't mulch it every year because it's relatively low bushes and they're close to the perimeter, so
Okay, so the
it's-
bush is
yeah.
covered. so
I
it's
think
not-
yours
yeah.
are burning bushes in that,
Yeah.
aren't they, out there?
Yeah.
They seem to be pretty
It works
healthy.
actually well because they really don't require any maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either the burning bushes or the viburnum will offer a little more variety. There's, a number of species.
You can't plant burning bushes in Massachusetts anymore.
Is that on the?
Oh, is that
It's an
right?
invasive species.
Well, if I take them from another site, is that okay? I'm not adding to the problem, right? Is that, okay, just asking.
You can buy them in Rhode Island.
I didn't know that, actually. They're out of my planting plan now.
So if everybody's okay, why don't, do we want to make a motion to release the bond, and then we'll do a separate motion on the cul-de-sac, so.
Move that we release the roadway bond in the amount of $11,000.
Well, it's the overall bond, I think, for the project. It's more than 11,000,
Yeah.
and also the site opening bond, right? It's
Oh,
11 plus 5.
you want to do both?
I want to do both of them together, yeah.
Oh,
And then
okay.
we're going to do the cul-de-sac separately.
Okay, and have
Yeah.
release the site opening bond in the amount of $5,000 totaling $16,000.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Right.
Okay. And then if somebody can make a motion to direct the planning department to work with the applicant on the final design of the cul-de-sac, the green space in the cul-de-sac.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you very much, folks.
Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, so next is 1600 Osgood Street. Yeah, that's the address. Osgood permit. So we've had this open for a while. Gene, can you tell us where we are in terms of the submissions and the details and all the things we have or don't have, as the
Yep.
case may be?
So several items came in over the last couple days. A revised plan set was submitted at approximately 11:30 today. The response to stormwater peer review and civil peer review was sent very late today, and it's actually been handed out in hard copy tonight, so that was not sent electronically. The checklist for the bylaw, section 17, the application is required to meet the dimensional design and other criteria described in 17.9 through 17.15. A checklist was sent in, and essentially bulleted under each section and subsection was a statement that the applicant, paraphrasing, does not believe that the requirement is applicable to this project, and further, if the board deems that it is, that they request a waiver. So that was kind of consistent throughout the memo. There are additional comments provided in each section. So the board needs to determine on waiver requests. Profiles, landscape exhibit, current parking count estimate, lighting specs were all submitted for tonight's meeting. The board and peer reviewer will need to determine the adequacy of those submittals.
So when did we get those?
Again, you have a hard copy there, but they were sent in the packet on Sunday. I sent
Okay.
those. And I did put a hard copy of the landscape exhibit and the profile, because I know you were interested in seeing the profiles. So comments from boards, town officials, and other. The fire chief has submitted comments. You have a hard copy of each of these. He has read the Hancock Associates Civil Review letter, and his comments are essentially he agrees with the concerns mentioned, and he has actually sent the plans to the state fire marshal's office, and he is waiting for comments back. The town manager submitted some correspondence today reflective of a Board of Selectmen meeting that occurred this past Monday night, and again, that's hard copy at your table. The conservation administrator submitted comments today. The ZBA chair responded to the email when I sent the package to him, that the ZBA has heard an appeal and filed findings with the clerk's office. Those are the only comments I've received from the ZBA.
What does that mean?
He just responded to the email when I sent it. I had to send him the application package, and that was his response. So I'm just giving that was received from ZBA. No additional comments have been received from them. Last meeting, there was concern raised with the FAA requirements, so I reached out to the manager of the airport, Lawrence Municipal Airport. He responded that he did not know what the FAA involvement would be and that he would check with the regional office. I sent him a follow-up email. I have not received that response back to the follow-up. And as far as other comments, the package was sent to the DPW, Police, and Board of Health, and I've not received comments from them yet. And one other outstanding item that has been discussed in the past is the required vote for a plan approval, whether it's majority or supermajority. So there's several items, and again, unfortunately, a lot came yesterday and today, so they're hard copy, and one even came tonight, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. So I guess we will hear from the applicant, who I presume will address many of the issues that are on this list. So are you?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Dan Leary, and I'll be happy to walk through and address these items.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. First, I'll say that you do have brand-new sets of plans that incorporate comments that were received as late as yesterday, and some even and some other information that incorporates comments that were even received today. We really have been working tirelessly, given comments and trying to keep up in real time to make sure that we answer comments. We got a lot of great comments, and I believe we've addressed them. If, Mr. Chairman, if acceptable to you, I'd prefer to walk through first the document that's entitled Section 17 Osgood Smart Growth District that goes through the bylaw paragraph by paragraph to answer how we believe we comply, to best ensure that maybe that we answer questions in that systematic order, if that's acceptable.
It's whatever order you want to go in is fine, but realize that we have, a bunch of peer review comments that we have to address that are pretty significant.
Yes, sir.
John, you have this document in hard copy as well.
Okay.
On section 17, on dimensional and density requirement, there's a number of components in a table, and maybe the best way for me to address them is to just hit, so with respect to the minimum lot area, we don't feel that,
Yeah, just a question.
Mr. Kellogg?
We're looking at the Eggleston Engineering for 915?
No, we're looking at this.
We're looking at, okay, okay. Okay.
Just for future documents, it'd be helpful if you date this, we're getting so much of a, we've had, I think, 3
Yeah.
documents which were titled the same,
My apologies.
section 17. Just make it
Yes.
easier when we going back through them in the future.
We will. With respect to minimum lot area, we don't feel that this is applicable. It talks about a minimum lot area of 1 acre to 15 acres. It just, it doesn't seem to apply to the project. But as Ms. Enright said, for many of these, we feel they may not be applicable, but should you determine that they are applicable, we do respectfully request a waiver. So with respect to this, as we've outlined in the past, this is just over 10 and a half acres of ground mount system and 5.75 acres of the roof in terms of gross area. Is there?
Well, minimum, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you have to go through all of them, but if you want to go through all of them, we're not going to give you an answer if we understand what you're saying here, so let's just sort of go through it. If we have questions, we'll
Okay, excellent.
ask.
With respect to building height, the existing building's 37 feet, it's well under 55 feet, and we don't believe that the parking canopies are what's being contemplated by that requirement. And, excuse me, with respect to what's put on the roof, as we had previously shown, it's lower than the height of the parapet, so it shouldn't be required. With respect to the front yard footage, we're 420 feet away from Route 125. The setback is a minimum 50 foot, so we think we're well clear of that. With respect to principal buildings, we don't feel that solar panels are buildings, and we can discuss that in further detail. We've submitted a legal memo, but we don't believe that, with respect to this table, that principal buildings is applicable either. Accessory buildings, we would have the same response, that these are not accessory buildings. With respect to floor ratio area, and I guess I can just outline that the floor ratio area we've calculated to be 0.2512 to 1. It's very small and doesn't seem to apply. And lot coverage for a 125-acre lot that we're on, lot coverage ratio of about 25.12% is, excuse me, that's correct. Okay. So that takes us through this table. With respect to 17.10, parking, as we've stated in the past, there's over 6,440 total parking spots at the facility on the parcel that supported what was once in that building. Currently, we've accounted for 1,389 of them. So there's over 4,000 something parking spaces that are unused at this time. We have submitted a parking analysis as part of our to the peer review, and we actually addressed that one a little bit later. This is one of their comments, so maybe we get into that.
Question on parking. There's a couple, when you're talking the 6,400 spaces, are you counting any in the A&R lot, the residential lot that was carved out, or not?
That's all the parking spaces.
So those need to be backed out of that 6,400. And then are you counting the parking spaces which are leased out to the bus terminal that have all the storage boxes on there, that are parking spaces that are being used by the driving truck school, which are no longer parking, Spinning Express, and then there's quite a few companies, I think, missing off your list, like Tompkins Landscaping is in there, there's a blacksmith in there. I think there's at least 6 or 7 companies I saw that were missing off your list in your parking, so I think you need to come back, and normally what you'd do is you'd say, okay, the bus terminal has, what buses are, would have, 100 or 500, I have no idea, parking spaces in that area. The area that down back, which is being used for the storage boxes, those have 600. But you can't count those for parking when you're utilizing it for another use. You rented it out, correct, to these companies for their use?
There are properties that are parking spaces that are currently rented for some.
But if you're using it for another use, you got to back.
We don't rent out parking spaces.
I'm sorry.
We do not rent out parking spaces.
And
there's no-
We're going to have a one-way discussion. If you want to speak, come up and,
Just to clarify on the record, we do not rent parking spaces, and anything that we show on the plan are areas or spaces that we would be able to use as part of this particular project. We will back out the total, from the total count, the number of spaces that are quote-unquote non-locust that are on the mixed opportunity zone or the residential A zone, and we'll get you that number. Any other space that we show on the plan is a space that we have the ability to use as part of this project.
So those, you can use that, so someone go down and park where all those storage boxes are right now, down back on the south.
No, we're not. This plan is not showing you a plan of what we're going to do. I'm sorry. The plan is showing you a plan of what we're going to do as part of the project approval. We have the right to move those storage boxes, and we will move those storage boxes as appropriate and as part of this plan. So if this plan is approved and the project moves forward, anything that's in an area that we're showing you on the plan will be moved.
Okay. So then I think but I think you still need to show us the parking, how many parking spaces are in each area. That's a typical plan submittal. Shows where you come up with the 6,000 parking spaces even.
Okay. We can do that.
Yeah, okay.
General design standards, 11.1. This has to do with intent, and I believe that it probably doesn't need to be discussed. I think that we.
copy of the bylaw that we can see. It's hard to.
My version here is highlighted.
Okay, yeah. Because in each one of these, we got the response, but we can't tell 1, 2, 3 what the items are. Okay, go ahead, that's fine.
So we believe the project meets the intent of this section as referenced by materials we've submitted. With respect to building and structure placement, so bullet number 1, with respect to buffering, we don't believe this is applicable because what we're proposing is to place equipment on existing developed land. The parking structures are over 420 feet from a budding roadway and screened by existing landscaping and buildings at the property. We've got Wheelabrator on one side of the property. We've got Route 125. We've got land owned by this property owner abutting to the north and to the south. We're 436 feet from the proposed residential district, the nearest canopy. So we feel we have plenty of setback and standoff from potential abutters.
Well, I think the problem that you have regarding general design standards is that at the core of what this process is explaining what it is that you're going to present and what it looks like and how it will appear to the people in the town. That's not something we would ever waive in any circumstance. I've never, I've probably seen 100 site plan reviews, and we've never once waived that. I don't see any way, because that's the core of our process, is understanding what it's going to look like and how it's going to be buffered and mitigated. And if you're proposing to waive all that, I think that's a problem.
We've submitted pretty significant plans to address how the structures, how the equipment sits on the roof. I guess as I'm coming through this, as I'm going through the bylaw, I'm just addressing literally paragraph by paragraph.
Well, yeah,
I don't think
know,
it's
but
not proposing
what
to.
I'm suggesting is that this 11.1 and 11.1.2 is pretty core to our process, and your comments are this is all waivable, and I think what we're suggesting politely is it's not.
I agree 100%.
So might I, we show them the pictures so that they can understand what the perspective is. If the concern is what's the buffer and how far back it is, we actually took some live pictures out there today because we heard the same concern at the Board of Selectmen Monday night. And if you want us to pause here on the presentation, we can pull up those pictures. We can show you those pictures.
Well, I have no problem. We'd be glad to look at them, but my concern is that we started going through this section, and you suggested that these things are waivable, or the application is not or doesn't need to address this. Either it does or it doesn't, and the fact that you're showing pictures says it does. And just having, or is it photographs? What is it that you have? We haven't seen it yet, so.
Well, we just started the presentation. We haven't shown you yet because we stated that we were going to start the presentation by walking through the different sections and explaining to you what our beliefs are. And that's where we're at right now. If you'd like, we can, as I said, we could pause here and we can show you the photographs that we have.
So what would people like to do?
Well, I guess I don't, like, either it's waivable or it's not. So are you saying it's not waivable?
Okay, so
Do you have
three things. I got this. Okay. Number one, we believe it's waivable. We believe it's waivable because under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3, it can't be regulated unless it's safety, health, or welfare. Solar cannot be regulated. The town has some, what it looks like and how you're going to buffer it from abutters is safety.
Let's do a restart.
Okay.
You've already basically said that you've given your opinion on why it's waivable. I think we should move on because I don't want to get confrontational tonight. I think you're trying to get confrontational with this, and I prefer you wouldn't do that.
With all due respect, what we are suggesting to you is while we think it's waivable, we've also offered you actual factual information that we're pointing out, which is that it's, if I could finish, it's 420 feet setback from the road. We think that plays a major impact on how it's viewed from abutting properties. Number one. Number two, it's 436 feet from the nearest residential property, which, by the way, is owned by the same group that owns this property. We think that helps mitigate the impact to abutting residential properties. It's abutted on the west by the Wheelabrator incineration facility. We point out that to you because we believe that that mitigates the view from the west. From the south, it is owned by property also owned by the applicant. It is set back substantially from any adjoining property that would have any view of it, and we went out and we took pictures of it, and we're prepared to show you the pictures. So in fact, what we're saying is, while we think it's waivable, and while we think it's not applicable under 48 Section 3, we have in fact addressed it from the north, the south, the east, and the west, and we've taken pictures to show you tonight, because the truth of the matter is we would prefer to make you happy and show you that we're looking into every concern that's raised. So as we take each point, if you stop us, we will show you what we've done for our research, like I stood up and offered to do, and make it clear that, again, While we think it's waivable, we have gone out and listened to every concern you've raised, and we've gone out and done things like taken pictures, taken measurements, and done the things that this board and the Board of Selectmen have asked us to do. Thank you.
Okay, let's see.
If I could just make a suggestion. In the time we've spent discussing this thing, somebody who's pretty good at cut and paste with Photoshop could have done a mock-up of the view from 125 and from the north and the south.
We have it from here.
Okay,
Yeah.
have you superimposed what the panels will look like on that?
No, we took the view. You can barely even see the parking lot from the street, so we took the pictures and
Well,
gonna
we're
show them to you.
speculating. If you want to show us the pictures, show us the pictures.
Okay.
We start with the pictures, and we have submitted some renderings, but happy to review them. Yes, thank you, Gene. So we've heard some comments from the community, certainly an understandable concern about coming down the hill and looking into a great big sea of solar panels. And it's just not, that's not the reality of this particular property. We have a very large bank of evergreen trees that shield this. So what I did is we wanted to show what it would actually look like as you're driving down Route 125. So here we are at the, if you could go back up, please. Sorry. If you could, you're standing right on the corner of the police station here, looking off. You can see the property off to the right. Where the solar array would be is directly behind the trees, right in front of you there. So here you're looking northwest. And if you could, to the next slide, please, Gene. So this is going about 50 feet down the road to, I'm sorry, could you just zoom up, Orchard Hill Road, which is the entrance to the police station, and there's some other businesses out back. So this is looking at the property right where Gene has it zoomed in is about where you see the northeastern tip of the solar panels, right over that car, if you could see right through those trees, but you can't. It's completely hidden. So the next perspective is if you're standing at pump number 3 at the gas station and looking out across the intersection, if you could zoom back out, please, Gene, just so I can get some perspective on this. All the way out, please. So as you're standing at the intersection, this is what you're looking out across. As you can see, there's really mature, large trees, deciduous and evergreen within there. We also have a landscape exhibit that we've submitted that we can walk through that shows what is existing there for landscaping. But it's really a stretch to say that anybody even driving by that doesn't want to take their life into their own hands at this intersection is going to be really distracted by a sea of solar panels.
You mentioned something about land. Do you have a landscaping plan, a buffering plan of what you're going to do around these things, or are you saying it's just the existing state of landscaping?
It's the existing state of
So there's no
landscaping.
landscaping plan that you have buffering, there's no new plantings or anything like that that you're proposing?
We're not proposing any new plantings. We've shown in exhibit what's there.
What's there, but nothing new, okay?
But
So is this the only side that's going to be on? When you drive by, is
no.
that the only side it's going to be on?
No.
So do you have pictures going to the other side?
That's where it
The
started.
concern raised by the selectmen at the meeting on Monday night was driving down the hill and coming past the police station and what it would look like. So that's what we went out and we took pictures of today. To the north, if I might, to the north of the building, it's going to be behind that building.
So there's not going to be anything on the right side?
It's going to be
Going towards the
behind.
soccer fields?
It is going to be behind this building. So when you're on the street, it's behind this building right here.
How about when you're coming up to the building, going past the soccer field?
If you're driving up on our property,
No,
Yeah,
no,
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 coming
coming
down.
125 past the
Neighbor.
soccer fields.
yeah, we'll be up against the building.
So do you have pictures from that side, or no?
We do actually.
See, I happen to think
Yeah.
that these things look nicer than the asphalt. And all you got to do
Thank
is
you.
just throw up some pictures of the thing.
Yeah.
Get out of here
You
before
asked for
midnight.
perspectives at the last meeting, and in the package that we submitted to you, that you received on Sunday, we went out and we did do the perspectives. This is in the materials that you have. Okay, so we did do what you asked for. You picked us, you picked
Actually,
them.
we asked for the profile.
We asked for profiles.
Yeah.
We have a
Profiles.
profile too.
Yeah, we have
Can you
profiles
put it
also.
on a thing? Usually when we have an applicant, the engineer brings their own easel.
But you got pulled up close with you.
There's a couple on that right there. Okay, take one.
You know what, put that, yeah, go ahead. Never mind.
This on the landscape. This is what they call the rendering, and then they have a landscape exhibit, which is on the right-hand side of the page displayed. And you have these in hard copy too.
This is the profile.
Profile and elevation.
We did both that you wanted to. We did both what you asked. We went to the points that you pointed to on the plan and asked us to take pictures from. And we did pictures and we did profiles. And we
Are they
submitted
in
them.
this? What are
You
the-
might have smaller versions of them in
You
the
have a copy,
materials,
John, in your
folded up, and
material.
they are in your package, okay? Thank you. Do you want, would someone prefer the bigger version? Do you want me to bring this up
That's
there?
what he's calling the profile, John.
This one?
That's the profile. That's what they're submitted as a profile. If you look close, it measures distance.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Just responding to the photos that you showed, looking at the portion on the north side of the building. So it's a total surface area of 6 acres of panels on the ground. How many of those 6 acres of panels are currently shown on the drawing to be located on the north side of the, on the south side of the building, the south side?
I would have to, rough order of magnitude, about,
It's about half of the ground-based panels, isn't it?
There's a lot of
So just use your,
about half of the ground.
just use your, right there, that portion,
So
yes.
it's just this portion, this whole portion. That's about a third of the total site.
No, of the 6 acres that are on the ground.
Oh, on the ground?
These are behind structures.
Okay, so
These are behind the building.
just the front part,
It's
just
about
that
half.
part.
It's about half.
about half. So about 3 acres of panel surface area in that block of panels.
Correct.
Okay.
Where is that?
We can confirm all that, but for
So
discussion
that's,
purposes.
just so that I'm correct, I want to confirm that I'm looking at it correctly. That block of panels that we just pointed to, that's the block that would be closest to where you took the photos from the police station.
Correct.
Correct. So point out the police station,
So,
please.
so the first photograph was taken right here.
Perfect.
The
That's the
second
police
photograph
station.
was taken right here at this road.
Got it.
And the third photograph was taken right outside pump number 3.
Right, and so the only thing I'm trying to get a handle on here is in the photos, I understand that there's trees there. When you're at the intersection of the road, then you do have a line of sight. That's where in the photo we could see the 18-wheeler truck going by. But what's not in the photos is 3 acres worth of solar panel surface area. And, you know, it's a big, cumulatively, that's 3 acres worth of solar panels from that view. So it's not like from that photo, we're saying, you know, those cars look small, because the cars do look small, but it's not cars, it's 3 acres worth of solar panel surface.
May I just post up one rendering that?
Sure, yeah.
I think we'll, the presentation that was in today's packet that's The,
This one?
not that, this, it was Board of, entitled follow-up. That's taken from standing in the middle of a white pine tree. Gene, I think it's from the last meeting. I'm sorry, it was the cover from either the last meeting or the meeting prior. We did include a number of renderings. One of the renderings is right from this intersection, which is why I wanted to, that shows, that includes the existing trees, the mature trees. It'd be titled, I believe, follow-up, the one at the very, there it is, thank you. That's it. So this is the rendering, if you're standing at the intersection. This shows generally, what this doesn't show is the lower hedge of actually mature shrubbery that is there, but this shows the significant mature trees that are on site with the modules, the panels themselves at the correct height, vehicles at correct height, the smokestack's there. What's not shown there is the smokestack from Wheelabrator behind it.
But in this, you can't see a mass of glass solar panels. What you really see are pillars going up and a roof going across.
Correct.
Okay? It's not unattractive.
I don't, you've got to be up on the hill to see the solar panels. I don't know what else to say. It's going to be tough to see them from the abutting property of where there's large, I'm sorry.
The elevation comes down from here, going to the front edge of the property. So the hill is kind of up here, going towards the airport, up towards Holt Road. So, to see the glass, it's facing the trees. So it's behind the trees on property that's owned by the applicant. So if you looked at the pictures that we showed before, when you're at the police station, you're here, you're at the intersection, you're here, when you're at the gas station, you're here, and you're almost parallel to.
Yeah, but
and then
that's not what he said. What I think he said is from the top of the hill, you can see the whole field of, at least that's how I interpreted
If you're at the top, if you're here.
You can.
On the applicant's property, standing up in a tree, and you look down.
Well,
you can
that's,
see.
if that's what you meant, then fine. I'm just trying to get a little bit better understanding.
I'll just clarify, just because it may have been confusing. There's an embankment that comes up here from the parking lot. The grade comes up, and then this great big bank of white pine trees is up, actually elevated. The root systems are elevated above the parking lot. So you have to be standing, you have to walk up this hill, and you can see it.
Is there going to be any clearing on that hill to increase the?
No.
There's going to be no tree clearing to increase the sunlight on those panels?
No.
But
Okay.
again, you can't say that because.
Well, they would have to, if we make that a condition, you would make,
Yeah,
if we made that a condition that you won't clear.
That's fine.
So the applicant would accept that.
That's a beautiful bank of old trees.
On the other side.
The current loading of the panels that are in here that we just got, or is this changed? This is dated September 25th, and I know these are dated, the same one you have up. Is this set of plan?
John, are you sure?
There's one change.
There were less panels because of the alleyways we created.
Yes. So this site plan was printed prior to the updates that are in the bank. Aside from some changes we made for improved maneuvering and for better pedestrian access into the building, and incorporating the comments from the peer review, the one set of modules we did move from the ground to the roof is this section down here. Everything else is generally where you see it.
So that one's struck.
Can these be easily relocated? Like, if someone was to build another piece of building somewhere, and we said, well, we'd rather have it on the rooftop of the new building rather than a carport, can they be moved,
Yes,
the carport, I mean, to the roof later? Or?
yes.
Well, the question is, how much
It-
roof capacity do you have that wouldn't be already taken for them? Right? I mean, if the roof is already full with them, you can't put more on the roof.
I meant if we built, if someone.
Well, that's,
built a new building
no,
at
that's
some
to your
point.
point, is if they are flexible and movable, that's one thing, but if there's no place to put them, then, you know.
One of the questions the Board of Selectmen asked on Monday evening, and we did agree to it, and you'll see it in the town manager's letter to you that's included in the package, which is the willingness to relocate the panels. All the panels are the same. Doesn't matter if they're on the roof of the building, if they're mounted on the ground, or if they're on top of a carport. They are connected by something called a panel claw, which is made by Panel Claw, who's a tenant in the building. The panels can be taken out of the claw, and they can be moved anywhere. And one of the things that we stressed to the Board of Selectmen Monday is, if we have the opportunity to build a new building, we absolutely would take the panels, lift them up off the carports or off the ground or wherever they are, and put them on the top of a new building. So if that's your question, yes, absolutely, and we've represented that in front of the Board of Selectmen Monday evening.
But it's a new building, you would put it on the roof of a new building, not an existing building.
That would be more room on this building to put any on the roof of the building?
The fourth picture that was sent today.
We're, it does look like a very large building. We filled it up to what we believe is the maximum feasible.
She's going to put the picture up for you.
Oh, thank you. We have a great aerial that'll speak to this point. We filled it up to the maximum extent feasible. On the very large building, which is all acres and acres of roof, there's a lot of mechanical and electrical equipment, penthouses. It makes it very difficult to integrate solar. In the first couple of phases of this project, from 2007, 2008, we filled up the larger areas to the south that are, there's 200 kilowatts of panels on the roof. It's really hard to see them. It's such a large roof.
These are the kilowatts that are on the roof right now. This is the main building, and as you can see, kind of the sea of mechanicals on the roof of that building. But they did, this is the solar facility that services the building. Okay. If you look at the plans that we're proposing, if you zoom back out, they would be going on the main building in the front, and they would be going on the warehouse building in the back. Those are the roofs that have the least amount of mechanicals, have the greatest access, and could support the most that we could. After one of the meetings, we did look at one of the sections, as we showed you, that we would be eliminating. We're actually taking that, and we found a spot for that one up on the roof. So we looked to maximize, and actually would be willing to continue to look to maximize to the extent that we can find pockets on the roof and move things off of carports. It's going to be difficult to do, as you can see from the picture, but to the extent that we can do it, we will, and we did it once this week by moving the section that Dan was showing you over here.
What is the percentage of?
No, I was just going to say, what were you saying was moved from over here?
This small section.
Yeah, was moved to the roof.
What percentage of the amount of panels on the south side of the building are you moving up onto the roof? So that section you showed us, that's 10% of the panels on the south side, 20%, 30%?
Looks like about
5%? Okay.
Ish.
Where's the tractor trailer training place in the scope of this?
Yes, ma'am. So that's up top here.
In the back.
In
Are
the
they
back.
going to stay there? Are they going to stay there?
They would be relocated as part of this project.
Off the site or on the site?
That's a discussion that the property owner will have with them that we prefer not to have at this meeting.
So it's like less business is going to be going on there because of this?
No, not
I'm
necessarily.
just sorry. Yeah, okay.
Not necessarily, I disagree with that, but
They
I
wouldn't be there
understand.
anyway, once the mixed use and residential.
There'd be no business going on, but
Yeah, but I don't think they'd be driving trucks around. Gotta hit this
We're-
up like a favor.
I'm not sure that it makes sense unless you want to go through every single one of these, because I think we're going to end up in sort of the same place. I guess one question that I would ask you, and this is one that I just don't completely understand, is 11.15, storm drainage. You basically say there is no impact, yet we have a lot of correspondence back and forth with our peer review that says there is. So I'm starting to feel schizophrenic again. On the one hand, you're addressing those issues, on the other hand, you're saying there's no impact. I guess, what's the basis for your comment here that there's no impact?
May I invite up Rick Waite from Meridian Associates, or Ann Martin, Rick Waite from Meridian Associates to address this.
Thank you. Rick Waite from Meridian Associates, Principal, Professional Engineer. Before I address it, can I just ask of Jean whether or not she got the comments in from Jennifer this afternoon?
Yes, I did.
I don't think you mentioned that in the beginning when you were going through the...
Yes, I did.
Okay. I probably wasn't paying
I called
attention.
her the conservation administrator.
Okay,
And I
thank you.
said she submitted comments, and they do have them in hard copy.
So just to start with, that letter basically says is that we're out of the conservation/wetlands jurisdiction based upon a filing that happened where the wetlands are still valid through the year 2018. She concurred because we brought the wetlands in from that filing onto our plans and provided her all the information that she needed to, along with our environmental consultant who's actually here tonight, Ann Martin from LEC. So you got a letter from Conservation, or from Jennifer specifically, saying that we don't fall within the Wetlands Protection Act per se. So as it pertains to the issues from Lisa Eggleston, if I could try to summarize what I believe her position is, and I don't think it's debatable what her position is. Lisa believes that under your bylaw, we're subject to the state's stormwater management guidelines. I believe in my heart and know almost factually that she does not believe that we fall at all within the State Wetlands Protection Act, but I think she has a interpretation of your bylaw that says that we need to comply with that state act. I think she would rather have that discussion between us and the board to find out whether or not that interpretation is in fact correct. It certainly is our interpretation that we do not fall within the act, and that when the bylaw was drafted up, I doubt really they contemplated this type of project being built and trying to apply that standard to this project didn't seem to make much sense to us. So again, it's our interpretation that we do not, under any sense, fall under the state act, and it's our interpretation that the local bylaw can't bring us in under the state act either. So what we tried to do,
So my interpretation from Lisa is she agrees the state stormwater standards are debatable, but what she has called in is section 171115
Correct.
under our bylaw requirement, which calls for the first 1 inch of runoff to be treated, and number 9, runoff from parking lots shall remove oil and sediment, which today there is no treatment on the parking lot, and that this is a development that would then trigger
correct.
a net improvement.
That is her interpretation.
Okay, so-
And what we're saying is that we disagree with that interpretation because under the state act, we're not required to meet that obligation. Furthermore, though, what we have proposed is the language that's in the Stormwater Management Act says to the best extent practicable, and that's a very interesting word. And instead of trying to debate whether or not the interpretation is one way or the other and suggesting that we try to figure out what's practicable, we put a proposal that says let's try to do a compromise. Let's try to do practical, not practicable. And we suggested in our memo that we commit to $50,000 worth of stormwater management upgrades in order to satisfy this and try to move off the subject of interpretation as to whether or not we need to comply with the state stormwater management guidelines or not. Now, I've got another expert witness here, and Ann Martin from LEC, that could get up here and tell you that unequivocally we do not fall under the state act. And maybe it's inappropriate, and I really hesitate doing this, but you have another consultant in this room. Maybe you could ask his opinion on that issue also, and that's probably inappropriate, but I'd throw that out as a suggestion.
So, where does that leave? I guess you're saying that,
We've always
well,
required.
I don't know. I'm
Our
confused. I don't know what that means.
So Lisa submitted her review comments on 9/15. It was the day of the last meeting, and they were received late. But as far as I'm aware, unless it's incorporated in today's memo, those have not been directly responded to, Lisa.
that's,
Other than this suggestion, there was an email from Ann Martin regarding this $50,000 negotiable.
I guess the question is, have you responded to our consultant's thing point by point? Or,
No, we have not. I think it was in Ann Martin's discussion with Lisa. She wanted us to have the discussion with the board and see if it made sense. And it's her interpretation. We can't change her mind. That's her interpretation, and ours is quite different. So I think she wanted us to have the conversation to say, can we get off of the interpretive issue, and would the board be willing to accept an offer from us to commit $50,000 to stormwater mitigation upgrades?
I wouldn't,
it's all on your property.
can I add? Can I add?
That one I don't get, but, I mean, this isn't like a subdivision, like where we bond things for improvements in the right-of-way. This is all on your property, so who would be giving $50,000 to whom?
It's a couple of things. Your very first question was, is there an impact or isn't there an impact? Your head was spinning. The one thing we all agree on is there is no impact. We're not changing the surface area of the property in any way, shape, manner, or form. Lisa Eggleston agrees with us, with our engineers, the project itself does not have an impact. So the question
I'm
becomes...
sure that's the case, but we'll go back and we'll ask that question again explicitly of her.
Okay. The question then becomes, when there is no impact, is there an obligation? So one of the reasons that we don't believe there's an obligation is because there is no impact. So we don't believe that there's anything that would trigger it. And I'll give you two random examples. We put act in, okay? And if you read Lisa's interpretation of this section, she says, no matter what, this section applies. So when we put act in as the community theater in a building, under her interpretation, this section would apply. And we would have had to have done drainage improvement at the time, when in fact we're not in any way, shape, manner, or form impacting runoff. The way she's interpreting this section, if you come in and make any application under Osgood, if we put 100% of the solar panels on the roof and didn't impact drainage, stormwater runoff at all, we'd still have to bring the drainage on the site into compliance. We don't believe that that's the case. We don't believe that this is a development or a redevelopment. We believe that this is attaching equipment to existing property. I would implore you to reach out to her. She will confirm for you. There is no impact on the property based on the project we're doing. So our suggestion was not argue about whether state law applies or whether there's a way to bring state law back in through a local bylaw, but what we were suggesting is let's look at some practical approaches to agreeing to do something to improve the conditions at the site so that we don't have to sit and argue about is it applicable, is it non-applicable, is it jurisdictional, is it non-jurisdictional, it hasn't been applied in the past when we haven't impacted drainage on the property, why is it being applied now when again we're not impacting drainage on the property? And Lisa will confirm for you nothing we are doing on this project is changing the runoff, the stormwater, or anything in any way, shape, manner, or form. So the question is just if you're not impacting it, does that somehow trigger the obligation to do something? Our belief is that it doesn't, but as a means to do something practical for the town and for this board, we had proposed that we would agree to, if you want to talk about it being in a bond, if you want to talk about it being a cash account, that we would pay for the engineers, and we would come out and we would do things that would improve the condition of the property. And that was our suggestion.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
So, with respect to response to Lisa's comments, did that go to Lisa today, Dan? Whatever memo you submitted at the beginning of tonight? Was that sent to Lisa as well?
That's sent to Lisa, yeah.
Okay.
Sent directly to you just prior to.
Okay. So, Lisa's reference is that a project within Osgood triggers these requirements. And I think we're at a point where I think she needs to be responded to in her memo. It's a redevelopment, and
Significant?
there is ground disturbance
We
for,
have not gotten a formal response back to her note.
no,
Okay. So, okay.
So I guess I understand that the last question from Mr. Simon
Can we speed this up and get through this? I think was the.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, is basically, yeah, if we go through this, if basically the answer to every question is exactly the same, then we don't have to go through every one, but if there's nuances or things that you think we need to understand on individual ones, I'd be glad to go through them, but I don't want to spend time repeating the same answers, so.
I think, and the last two questions were probably the best two examples I can think of. There is information and there are nuances to each and every one, or most of them. So if Dan could go through them briefly and you have no question, we can go to the next one. But I think even if he spends 10 seconds on each one, that way if any board member has a question, we can stop and explain what our logic and our thinking was.
With respect to 11.2 building structure and placement number 2, the building, so with respect to the rooftop equipment, nothing's visible from Route 125. In fact, building 70, which is out back, is not even, building 70 out back, it's not even visible from the road, so. Number 3.
I want to disagree.
Yes, ma'am.
There's been 3 times it's been mentioned previous to developed property and structures. You're adding new structures, you're adding new buildings. So I disagree with that statement that I think that starts in every single one.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll give you that the main building is there, but you are adding new buildings and structures to the property that will house these carports, so. I just want, and you, Mr. Rosen, you can sit down. That's just my statement. It's just my statement. You're not going to make me.
I do want to point out for the record that I submitted a legal analysis of this, and it's included in the package that was submitted to you. We look at the definition of a building, and a building has to include a roof, which is intended to shelter people, persons, animals, or property. There is no roof on these structures. There's a piece of equipment on top of a pole.
Shelters cars.
But this is a piece of equipment. There's nothing, it would be different if we were taking 2 pieces of metal and we were putting a roof on it, and then we were attaching electrical equipment on top of a roof.
That
Okay?
might be different. You're still sheltering
Because
cars.
if you take the piece of electrical equipment off, it doesn't do anything. It's not a roof. It doesn't meet the code or the regulations for a roof. Under the building code, it's not a roof.
It's not the building
It's a
code.
piece-
That's definition in Osgood, as you know.
You can't carport for a reason, right? So therefore, you're giving it a different use by your own definition. You're creating a carport, right? Isn't that what you're calling it? So you
Yeah, we're
can't have
calling it a
both
carport.
ways. You can't call it a carport and then say, well, it's really not a carport.
It's a piece of electrical
It's like
equipment that
saying
under
it's
the
a garage,
building
but it's not
code.
really a garage.
No, it's a roof that happens to gather sunlight and generate electricity.
No, but it's not a roof. Under the building code, it wouldn't qualify as a roof.
But in the definition under Osgood, where it talks about a building and the roof, it says the roof shall include an awning or similar covering. So if you're going to argue that it has to meet the building code definition of a roof, then why is this saying it could just be an awning, and that would meet the definition here?
But this is a piece of equipment. It's not an awning.
Well,
Okay. We'll agree
Well, I
to
think
disagree.
your comments are duly
We'll agree
noted,
to disagree.
and your legal memorandum is duly noted. Okay, where are we?
That was the gist of the next one, number 3. So moving on to 17.11.2, number 4. In here, we discussed the landscape, we referenced the landscape exhibit that was not yet presented, but is part of your packet where we show the existing landscaping that's surrounding. I'm just going to point out which one it is. Right here. So the landscape exhibit shows the landscaping from street views. As you can see there, perspectives 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and what you see. So questions relative to what are you going to see when you're coming down the hill from Haverhill, from Spring Hill Farm in that area, as you're coming down, if you can see that far. Behind, again, mature trees would be the canopy far off in the distance, again, lower than the height of the building that's immediately behind it. But that shows the existing landscaping that's on its site. Again, we feel because it's putting equipment on an existing property that additional landscaping, proposing additional landscaping would not be required by this section.
I mean, to give you some perspective, again, with all the site plan reviews I've ever seen, this is the first one I've seen that doesn't have proposed any incremental landscaping.
With number 5, with respect to orienting structures to provide pedestrian entrances to the sidewalk, we have, again, disagree with some of the requirements to this, but what we would agree to is to eliminate, as we've shown in today's drawings, which I don't think can go up on the screen, but I'd like to open up to page 7, because this is pedestrian safety, and this is very important. Please. Sheet 7. What you'll see is, which has changed from the plan that's on the board, is where you have the center access into the building from the south side in the main parking lot. What we did is we bifurcated the modules to create a gap in them, as well as provide markings on the pavement for walkway. So this is very similar to what you see when you come in the main entrance on the front on the eastern side, where you have a sidewalk which is clearly defined to encourage people to walk from their cars to the sidewalk and directly into the building as safely and efficiently as possible. So we've replicated that on the south side. We believe that because of the way on the north side that the parking canopies are broken up, that this we didn't need to make any changes. We also did the same thing on the western canopy as what we did on the south. So, if,
Where are they bifurcated? Can you point out?
you'll never be able to see across the table, but there is.
Are those the black lines?
So there's a walkway in between here, there's a walkway in between here, there's a walkway here and here. And then when you get to the parking plans and the signage plans, you'll see how they're striped and identified. Because anywhere where there's a double gap there, and we made sure we broke them up every 200 feet. John, can you see it, or do you want me to point to it? Yeah. Everywhere where there's
That's why I
here,
like them
and it
electronic.
directly,
Yeah, got it right.
it's here,
I get my emails
it's
on my iPad. I have a different
And
email
again,
account on my iPad.
try and direct them on the main one, we try and direct it directly across from the entrance to the property.
Sheet 9 shows you. Need to see that any further.
But there'd be nothing to stop somebody from just going through the car that's in front of them and keep going straight. Right?
I can address it now.
We added all of the markings, whether it's round side or dash side.
So since you're on page 9, since you're on page 9,
nothing to stop
one other question was asked is what is the darkened area around each post? So that's a double stripe. This is a response to one of the peer review comments about the base of the columns, which are encased in concrete mortar, that they actually encroached on the parking spaces. So what we did is we spread out and created a double line where those would be, so that as you're backing your car in, if you're adjacent to one of those columns, you have a clear and unobstructed parking space from the columns that are coming down. And that's what that is.
Now, if you didn't have that, you could just walk, the people would just walk straight through,
Yes, sir.
okay? Which they could still do even if you have that.
Yes, sir.
And also, sorry, this section is covered with connected solar, and this is covered with connected solar, and this is broken with no covering, or that's covered?
That's broken with
walkway
no
is
covering.
covered.
The
No
walkway
covering.
is not covered.
Okay. So the supports that are holding it all up are these black dots?
No, it all.
Correct. Those are the
The
columns.
support
Those are the
beams.
columns. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm hearing, like, there's two different discussions going on.
Sorry.
We will get to snow guards, we have that all incorporated into the plans, and we will get to that. And it does break up at 210 feet or 200 feet, because the request at our last meeting was to not have buildings longer than 210 feet. And while we don't agree that they're buildings, we have created the break. We used that as an opportunity to create the pedestrian walkway. And again, these are the nuances we wanted to show you that we took into consideration the comments that had come out of the last meeting and the Board of Selectmen meeting and from your peer review consultant.
So we'll have a walkway that doesn't stop them from not using the walkway, but lets them get wet. Okay.
If you would like to give us a waiver to put a solar covering over the walkway, I'm sure we could accommodate.
Thank you. Number 6, with respect to driveways and internal so we believe the driveways and internal ways, and we request, when we reference minimum parking space and aisle dimensions, and these are annotated on 8, 9, 10, and 11. We believe that, again, as you can see, the dimensions, that we would meet this requirement if it was applicable. With respect to number 7, we're not moving any dumpsters. With respect to number 8, this is only applicable to mixed development components. With respect to 11.13,
Wait, sorry.
I'm sorry,
I was still looking at
11.8 is
lighting.
specifically speaks to mixed-use mixed-use development component, and we're not on the mixed-use development. We're on the business opportunity zone development. I'm sorry, 17.11.2, number 8. So point 11.3, number 1, the project's making no change to open space. Numbers 2 and 3 are addressed by mature trees and screening that's already on the property, and we believe that that there's no other impact to number 2 and 3. And with respect to number 4, there is no increase in stormwater runoff rate or volume as a result of this project. 11.4, building masking and articulation. Number 1, what we have again done, while we disagree that these are solar panels or buildings, we did break up in every case possible parking structures that were over 210 linear feet. Numbers 2, 3, 4 are not applicable. Number 5, 11.5, building appearance and treatment. Again, we believe that these standards are not applicable to these parking accessory structures. Um, 11.6. Excuse me, and even in number 11.5, I did want to point out, because it's, I think enhances the safety, that even while these modules are over the cars that are parked, about 15% of the light will still transmit through them, so it's not like it's totally dark underneath it. It's like a parking garage in the daylight. It's still pretty well lit. 11.6, the development environment. We believe that this section applies to residential and retail development at the property and is not applicable. With respect to 11.17, landscaping. We believe this requirement is not applicable because we're attaching equipment to existing property and structures. If you do, we request a waiver, but all landscaping as was shown on the landscaping exhibit. With respect to lighting, this is good. It is applicable. So the existing parking lots lighting that's in the lot will be replaced by LED light fixtures that are mounted below the modules. So at nighttime, the light levels will be appropriate to standards for parking garages, and will not just provide light, but my opinion will provide a nice accent lighting to the property at night, which will attract people.
Something we normally see.
So
On sheet 21 of the package that you have in front of you, which is being opened up right now, we have added the detail for the photometrics. Basically, on each array, if you would, each row, there'll be one LED set in 24 feet from the outer edge of the array, and every 48 feet thereafter on center. Again, 24 feet from any edge, and then 48 feet on center. The detail of the light is shown on the plan, and there's a photometric sketch that we also provided that shows that at the height that these lights will be at underneath the array, there'll be 0-foot candles or 0 light trespass 24 feet out. That's why the first one said 24 feet inside, so the light trespass at the height these will be set at will be 0 at the edge of the canopies.
.9 parking lot landscaping has been discussed, but again, the exhibit shows what is existing. 11.10 pedestrian amenities and recreation. I think we've discussed this one also, that we are not, while adding walkways to access the building, we're not changing any of the, or relocating any of the existing pedestrian amenities that are on site. And the existing transit shelters will remain unaltered. With respect to utilities, this will be all completed in accordance with the National Electric Code, and major source circuits buried per the guideline, per the bylaw, and there will be no easements necessary for this project. Signage associated with residential use, which is 11.12, is not applicable. For non-residential use, we believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9 are not applicable. With respect to number 6, there are traffic control markings throughout the parking lot areas that are shown on sheets 8, 9, 10, 11, and as well as handicap parking signage shown on sheet 20.
Were these things that in the plans that we just got today in the prior version of the plans or not?
The signage was,
I mean, all these things you just mentioned, or are they just in like the lighting plan? Were they all in this version and not in any prior versions?
the
Photometric.
They
That's
were
in
added
there,
to
but
this.
I'm saying is, the stuff you just talked about, was it in the prior plans or is it just in this version?
Some of it was.
Some of it was handed in, but not in the plans, and we were asked to incorporate them rather than having them in separate sheets of paper to put them into the plans.
Most photometric plans, we never had photometrics before, so.
Right.
So,
Right.
so our peer review has not seen it yet.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yes,
I mean, it's brand new.
peer review on last, that we received on Monday requested they be added, and we added them to the canopies. Parking structures, excuse me. Storm drainage, roadways, 11.14. I'm sorry. 11.14, we addressed the minimum parking space and aisle dimensions on 8, 9, 10, and 11. There were comments, again, from the peer review, and the latest drawings incorporate how we meet those requirements.
I wanted to ask you a question about that. Are the parking spaces, the width and length going to be any different than they are today?
They meet the bylaw.
I didn't ask you that.
I don't know the existing parking stalls, what their size are. From the aerial plan, you can scale them off. Most of them are 9 by 18. I can't tell you that all 4,000 spaces.
Is that what you're going to propose going
We're
forward?
proposing 9 by 18 spaces.
So that's one thing. The other question I have is that, where do the posts come down? I mean, is there going to be posts between every parking space, or
So
just?
one of the things, and this is what we were going to get to in a couple minutes when we went through the peer review comments from Hancock Associates
Okay, well, then
specifically.
I'll wait for that then.
Sewer, not applicable. Electrical line and communications, I'll answer it the same way. It'll meet the National Electric Code and be buried. Street signs, there's no changes to the existing intersections, no monuments proposed. And the subzone design standards, we do not believe the requirements for permitted use in this subzone do not exceed 150,000 square feet. We don't believe that's applicable since this is not a new development, and it's merely adding electrical equipment to existing parking use and/or rooftop. If the planning board is in disagreement, then we respectfully request a waiver.
Okay.
The next item is we did answer in the form of about 4 slides, questions that were asked last week with respect to health and safety. And if I could cover those.
Well, is that on one of our things that we were looking for? I'm just trying to figure out where that fits into the open.
Just so I was going to hit these 4 slides and then get into the peer review comments.
Okay, fair enough.
Possible. So Gene, this is the planning board request for items. And this is actually one you had up a little bit earlier. It's for today's meeting, yes. I think it's the follow-up presentation right there, if I'm correct. I'm sorry, right? Thank you. So if you go down to the next slide, please, we've upped, so in the process of moving modules around, we've made updates to this. I don't know that there's anything materially to really discuss on that. The next slide, please, talks about snow guards, and this was a big question last week, and it was raised by Eggleston Environmental. As we've said from the beginning, the intent with these systems is for snow to stay on it until we want it to come off. So by incorporating snow guards, which are essentially rails that are bolted onto to the lower edge of the modules, this is for the parking canopies only. The canopies, if you recall, are at about a 7-degree tilt angle. It's pretty close to flat, so there's not typically sliding associated with systems that low tilt angle anyways. But these snow guards are designed to keep the snow on top of the modules. And the snow guard industry is a very established industry. It's far more common on rooftops, especially slate roofs. And companies that have been engaged in that business for decades offer these products for solar systems as well. In the next slide, as it relates to operations and maintenance, which is an excellent question, the facility will have an O&M contractor responsible for the safe operation and optimal performance. It's monitored 24/7 by an operations center. There's real-time alarming and electricians that will be dispatched if and when necessary. The system is going to be commissioned annually or recommissioned annually for electrical and mechanical components, wiring, and distribution equipment. Modules may be cleaned and snow may be removed as required, as it makes economic sense, or for safety. Any modules that are broken will be replaced, removed and replaced if that happens. We'll be conducting facility management training for the folks at the facility that may have to interact that, and the police chief was very grateful that we would be offering first responder training for North Andover Police and Fire and to orient them to the system. which is very important. On the next slide, please. Solar modules, certainly the ones that we're looking at, comply with the reduction of hazardous substances directives, in particular as it relates to lead. I was incorrect a couple weeks ago when I said that all solar panels do use unleaded solder. In fact, some still do use leaded solder. It's just a very, very small amount of it. Some modules do not. Regardless, it's one of the reasons, just like your household TV and a number of other things, that we don't like to see modules or electrical equipment go into landfills, which is why we would always recommend recycling components after they're at the end of the useful life. We've also included a white paper from the state of Oregon that discusses health and safety considerations everywhere from the beginning of the life cycle of a project right till the end. So I thought that was an excellent paper. And I think that's the last slide here, if there were no further questions.
So did you put together an O&M plan? For the
We
peer
haven't
review?
put together the construction drawings yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly will. An O&M plan for a project like this will be a binder about that
Right.
thick.
Well, usually our peer review goes through it, so that's the point. That's why I asked for the O&M plan the last time for the peer, because typically they review it to make sure it's adequate. There's nothing missing,
Okay,
so, okay.
understood. Finally is the peer review comments, which again, we've just sent out late this afternoon. This is dated October 1st, and it's, you'll see on there, Eggleston Engineering.
This one. This one.
I think we've discussed number 1 and 2 ad nauseum, so we won't discuss that. This has to do with the requirements for stormwater. With respect to number 3, is in discussion of green spaces, we do address that further below with a question raised by Hancock Associates, so I'll address that then. With respect to the existing pavement, I'm sorry, I'll just wait for you to get there before I keep going.
They all look the same.
You got yours? Okay. Yeah.
So the record notes that these comments came back today, and obviously our peer review has not seen them or opined on them, right? Gee?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Again, 1 and 2 have been discussed. Number 3, we discussed, later. Number 4, with respect to existing pavement, there are potholes on the property. The facility manager is currently conducting an RFP to have potholes and other pavement repairs completed. This is part of the annual maintenance that happens on the site. There are only 1,389 parking spaces required for the property, of which 419 are in the parking lot and not subject to the solar parking structures.
And just for clarification, that's the east parking lot, which is in front of the main building. That's in front, which, like for anyone who's going to the town offices, that's where you would ordinarily park, and that parking is remaining as is.
So as we put up a parking, as we do a project like this, there is equipment that's being moved around. There's concrete being placed in the ground, a lot of steel. It is very common, and we certainly would be proposing that as we finish up the late stages of construction, that we're repairing and putting the surface of the pavement to a very reasonable condition as to be expected under a brand-new parking structure. So that would include, aside, again, from repairing potholes or divots or things that get put in by the equipment, it'd be resealing, restriping of the lot. So it'll look like a fresh lot as we finish.
In what sequence do you do that?
The very last thing.
But you're not repaving, once again.
We're not, it's repaving.
Because on the east
there-
lot, there's probably at least 500 cut holes in that parking lot.
Okay, so,
I mean-
so there's an area where there, the north lot, I think.
Well, northeast, okay, yeah, north, whatever.
So there, certainly all those would be patched and finished to an acceptable surface.
But patching, I mean, as soon as you have a cut in a lot, I've done lots of parking lot maintenance, it doesn't seem like you want to attract new businesses into the facility. You would, if you wanted people to park on these mechanical devices attached to a structure.
Electrical
or a
devices.
Or electrical,
Thank you.
devices attached to a structure. You'd want to pave the whole lot. I think every single picture you gave us of all these other carports, they paved the entire lot. They didn't cut and patch. It doesn't seem like you want to improve the property. You just want to have a solar farm.
I think one of the things you see in the pictures is those were brand new constructed with new buildings at the time new buildings were constructed. I mean, which is different than adding something to an existing facility.
Endicott wasn't a brand-new building.
I don't think the
Whole
Sudbury-
Foods wasn't a
Sudbury
brand-new
High School
building.
wasn't a new building,
I strongly disagree with that, that those were all brand-new buildings. I'm just saying that not a single one of yours, I mean, it's going to be 5 times the cost to go around these to pave the parking lot after they're in. You have a lifespan of a parking lot which is past its lifespan already, that hasn't been paved since before Lucent left. So your lifespan, the parking lot is actually unsafe, and the building inspector could cite you right now. There's catch basins failing, there's holes cut in the parking lot, you have a roadway where you have a granite curbing going across it to stop people from driving down it, but if there's snow on it, someone's driving the granite curbing. It's pretty disturbing. You have jersey barriers on the north side to block cars from going into the building, which are crumbling. I'm just dismayed that you don't want to pave the parking lot and have it look nice, that you're just going to patch all, you're going to cut in more holes and just keep patching it. That's my comment.
I don't have evidence that it would cost 5 times as much to repave after.
To go.
I've got a much lower number I've received, but if and when it needs to be paved, I mean, I completely agreed. There's a section
It needs to
out
be
back
paved now.
that
It needed to be paved 5 years ago.
I don't, okay. We would not agree that the whole lot needs to be paved. That's a tremendous, that's not necessary at this point.
I agree with Lynn, and I haven't been out there until she pointed it out to me, but, you know, there's more of that lot that needs repair than doesn't.
In repair, yes, I just agreed
Repair.
completely with repair and resealing and restriping. And in certain areas, where the building was, we agree there's quite a bit more repair needed. But to go and, I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly, to repave a massive number of parking spots that go unused every day is just, it doesn't, it's not necessary, it's a waste.
So if you only did 1,440.
1,389 parking spaces will be in beautiful condition. I don't believe they need to be repaved.
Okay, well, let's move on. By the way, one logistics thing, the next time you come back with this, our practice has always been that if you need to get a Word copy of the document back from the peer review or whatever, where you want to put comments, and we usually keep the whole comment, and you put your comment underneath. In this case, we have to now look at two separate documents, which makes it a lot harder to look at, so.
We'll request a Word copy next time. For snow removal, we agree, it's got to be considered, and there's currently in excess of 5,000 unassigned and vacant parking spots on the property. And again, removal of snow from the aisles can be stockpiled there. With respect to number 6, we discussed that with the snow guards. Or we answered that with the snow guards slide previously. The next set of comments corresponds to the comments received from Hancock Associates, 925. Number 1 and 2, there's no further comments. With respect to number 3, sorry, now I have to pull that up as well. Thank you. With respect to number 3, this was discussed earlier. So this has to do with a parking analysis, which we've provided. So we provided a list of all the tenants based on square footage and the requirements per the bylaw for how many parking spaces per square foot or per person for the use, and provided that. So we believe we're several factors below the requirement on the site, on the property.
You're missing a bunch of tenants, so I'd ask you list all the tenants on there.
We will get that, as we
Yeah,
said
okay.
earlier, we will get that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I'm just clarifying.
Yes. With respect to number 4, show the LED lights. We showed the LED lights and the photometrics of how they comply with the International Illumination Society of North America. With respect to number 5, screening, parking lots, and use of screening. We believe the requirement's not applicable. Please see the landscape exhibit that we've already, again, discussed that shows the screening on the site.
The parking lot landscaping section talks about a lot more than just screening. I mean, it talks about, I would say, some beautification type landscaping, so that you don't have just morass of parking. So that's not really
Because we're not
addressed.
we're not developing or redeveloping the parking. It's existing parking. It's there. So we're not changing. We're not changing that. We're not changing what's there.
I mean, you're improving the parking lot. I think that the guidelines talk about improvements also, not just new creation. That's my interpretation.
With respect to number 6, we've updated the plans to show the bicycle rack. With respect to number 7, this was a question that was raised earlier and discussed, but I'll restate it. With respect to number 7, talks about if the idea is if you're backing into a parking spot, does any of the footing from the columns protrude into the parking space? And while that's very typical of just about all the parking lots around town, light structures and everything, that's how it's done. In this case, we agree that it would make sense to do something different, so we agreed to create a double line, which is about the width, which is the width of the column of the concrete, so that a parking lot would be free and clear from the columns that would intrude on them.
Can I take the next two?
And Rick Waite is going to take the next two.
Actually, I'm going to go back to the one that Dan just finished on. I think it was on Monday, I called Mr. Pesnola up and asked for clarification on his peer review comments so that I could properly address this. And I believe we've made considerable movement towards satisfying the requirements of the next several sections. On the previously submitted plans, if you can picture a 9 by 18 foot space, at the intersection of any two spaces, we would have a 3-foot wide column. And Mr. Pesnola pointed out properly that that column would infringe upon that actual 9 by 18 foot box. So one of the considerations that we talked about was doing a double painted stripe. So I think the best way that I can explain all of the next comments, and I'll be fairly quick on this, is if you go to sheet number 17 in your package, I think I can summarize exactly what we've done here. But we actually did a major redesign of the parking lot layout and of the arrays. On sheet 17, you'll see the actual parking spaces. You'll see what looks like the outline of the canopy. In dashed lines, it's the actual canopy overlay around them. So what we did is, if you look at that plan right down the middle, we separated the canopies into two sections so that nothing's more than 210 feet, and down the middle we're showing a painted walkway. On that plan, you'll notice that we have some dimensions, and there's more dimensions on other sheets that go to this point. There's a sheet that just shows the parking and setbacks from parking to parking. There is another sheet that shows setbacks just to the canopy. This one shows a combination of setbacks from parking to any of the nearest canopy overhangs and whatnot. And Mr. Pesnola also appropriately pointed out that in our previous design, the overhangs to the canopy infringed upon that 25-foot driving aisle, something that I had not paid much attention to, quite frankly. But the driving aisles, as proposed in the previous plan, were 25 feet, but up at the canopy level, they were only 22 feet. So the combination of that also had some concern on the fire turning radius ability. So we did a major redesign and shifted where the canopies are, where the parking lines are. And just to use this as an example, the question asked earlier, where are the columns? So in every single what I call array or canopy line, the columns are set right in the middle of the parking line structure. They're 30 feet on center. I believe the first one starts 10.5 feet in. That would be 9 foot for the first parking structure and 1.5 foot for the first column. So then you'll see that you've got two lines that'll be painted. That's the 3-foot line difference, so the outer part of that line will go right up to the concrete column. Then you'll have the next 9 by 18 foot space, the next 9 by 18 foot space, and then another 3-foot spacing. So the columns are just immediately down the end of each row, and again, separated by 30 feet. And we accomplished the full 9 by 18 foot spaces without interruption from the column itself. So the next thing that we needed to do was to satisfy the fire turning radius. And noted newly on the plan are the existing fire accesses on multiple sheets. The existing fire access points are now shown, the fire lanes. And not until very, very late this afternoon did we get enough information to provide this board, which I'm about to do in a moment, on turning radiuses. And I realize it's at the last second, but I literally got a call back from the fire department at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We needed to know exactly what apparatus they would be using out here so that we could properly do the auto turn analysis on our plans. They gave us that information. They then suggested that we call Pierce, which is their distributor. We got all of their technical dimensional information and put it into our auto turn analysis. And I actually provided Mr. Pesnola a copy of what I'm about to give.
So you know the height of all of the fire. Okay. And what is it? What's the bag? I don't know. It's in here. Okay.
So you got, so this just went to them today too, right? This just went to our, I'm like, kind of confused where we are in the peer thing. No, but like,
So really, there's not a whole lot to go through here. I really would respect that Mr. Pesnola have enough time to review this. But on the last page, which I need to provide on my letterhead and my doc, which I did not have time, I had to get here. I literally was finishing this at 5 o'clock. But the very last page shows a schematic of what auto turn will tell you. This is their size ladder truck, their largest size ladder truck. And the movement patterns that you see on this plan show that their fire truck can maneuver on the exterior aisles and through any of the middle of the aisles. And that in itself takes care of many of the comments from Hancock Associates on the fire trucks, the buses, and in the tractor trailers and the fire access roads. Also on, I can't remember if it's sheet 21 or 22, we've added a signage plan. Some of the signage is on the ground, some of it's in actual signs. And what I mean by that is many places we're putting painted traffic signals like stop lines, traffic lines painted on the surface. And in many cases, like pedestrian access ways, we'll be hanging pedestrian signs inside the array pointed towards the new pedestrian ways that we're proposing. And we've added fire access signage all on the plan that I just can't remember. It's one of the last two sheets that we have.
This doesn't give the height of the fire equipment. I mean, and my question is, what is the very lowest point that the panel supports will come to? And because that would then tell us, can the fire department actually go under those when it's making a
Well, I'll give you the answer to both of those. The turning radius doesn't take into account any of that because the turning radius just shows that I'm outside the structure. So it doesn't matter what height it's at. It could be on the ground, right on the ground, 2 feet off the ground. I'm moving well around them. That's what that last page shows, that analysis. But to answer your question,
don't always take the correct path.
Oh, absolutely, but the code and the fire chiefs, and I've done this in countless communities across the state, the fire departments and the peer review consultants use auto turn as their analysis from the engineer to prove that they can make those turns. And that's what was satisfied very clearly and cleanly here. The other thing that was real interesting to me, was a little eye-opening, was when I first started thinking about this, before I called Mr. Pesnola, I said, the parking aisles and the maneuvering aisles are required to be 25 feet wide by your bylaw. Why would your bylaw be designed any differently to not allow those turning radiuses? So when I eventually got the size of the ladder truck this afternoon and I ran the auto turn, I was very pleased to see it meets it, and it meets it very comfortably. But I think the answer to your other question is, and I can look on the detail sheet, it's on the plan that shows the lowest elevation on the low side of the array. I think it's at 11 feet, 11.1 feet, I think is my recollection.
I'm not sure a fire truck would go underneath that. I mean, auto turn, I think, deals with the turning radius around buildings.
No, actually, auto turn deals with this very issue very clearly. And again, it's not my job. You have your peer review consultants here. He'll review the information I submitted, and I'm sure he'll give you an answer that'll satisfy, so you're not hearing it just from me and being convinced by me. I'm just telling you, I was very pleased to see that it worked out so nicely. I just need to put this on my letterhead, my stamp on it. I apologize for not having enough time to do that.
I did have actually one other question, and it's maybe a little bit more of a structural engineering question, but What has the experience been about people hitting those things in a parking lot? I mean, you go into any parking lot, you see people scrape the walls and this, that, and the other thing. So inevitably, there's going to be somebody that's going to hit these. What happens?
So that's the purpose of the concrete column. The detail that's on sheet 20, I believe, shows the detail of the column itself, and all the reinforcing goes in there for that protection in case somebody does smash into them. They'll basically be shearing off a piece of the concrete, not doing any damage to the array.
Can I just follow up on that? Other than hitting the support columns, the lower edge of this, the panel, is 11 feet above the ground. So how was that height arrived at? Is that, for example, a height that most vehicles would typically be under that, so that most vehicles would not be in danger of clipping the low edge of the solar panel? Like, let's say someone is just driving a fairly large U-Haul truck. Are they going to be able to clear underneath that low edge, or is there going to have to be great care to be following the same type of guidelines that a fire truck driver does?
There's great signage, and there is, there's great, there's signage, and with respect to, I'll have to pull together the DOT guidelines on this as it relates to, for example, are we going to allow semi-trailers and trucks to be driving through this? No. We're going to bifurcate that in roadways and provide quite a bit of traffic guidelines for.
But let's say that we're not talking about tractor-trailer trucks. Let's just say we're talking about sort of medium-sized, just delivery truck, or just a U-Haul van. How did you arrive at the 11 feet as the optimal height of the low edge? Is there any type of guideline that we would look for there to try to minimize impacts on vehicles less than an 18-wheeler?
The short answer to that is we didn't come up with that. That's the standard for carports. The other answer is I'm sure we can get you that information as to how they came up with it. This is a standard, not a detail that we came up with. That's not our structural detail.
But you're basing it off a standard construction guideline for a carport?
That we will get you an answer to as to how the developers of the actual carport systems came up with that height. I don't know that answer, but it's a great question. We'll come up with it. I was just thinking when you were asking that question, one of the things that I don't think I incorporated on the signage plan was the low clearance height of these that are incorporated with the carport themselves. And I can certainly add those to the signage plan. I probably didn't show them because I know they come standard with the carports. They give the height on them, but I can add that to my signage plan.
I'm just thinking most days when I'm driving in, I'm listening to traffic, and it's so common to hear that, once again, a truck too high cannot get through Storrow Drive.
They have great signage.
And they have great signage.
These aren't semis, these are box trucks.
Right, box trucks, that's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would like to think that the way I've redesigned the layout here works very, very well so that no tractor trailers, no box trucks will be going down any of these aisles. The side aisle widths to the buildings, to any loading areas or drop-off areas are very significant, and there should be no reason for anybody trying to find a parking spot or going down one of these side aisles.
And is there any provision for the PVC pipe with the chains for access points that if you hit that, you're going to hit the low edge of the solar panel?
There aren't in our proposal, and quite frankly, in all of the installations that I've seen in carports, I have not seen that done either.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
So the tractor trailers in the loading dock area are in this lower section of the building, outlined in the black there. So you can almost see there's tractor trailers backed in
Right there.
there, and that whole area actually has bays for tractor trailers, that whole corner. And they today come in this access road where the number 4 starts, so at that main intersection, and they drive all the way to the back. There's a lot of spinning wheel type tractor trailers that Lynn referred to earlier, parked somewhat near those tanks towards the roadway. So what would be the tractor trailer route to get to those docks on this? Again, you may have made some revisions to this plan in today's past.
Excuse me. They're coming to the outside
Yeah,
and coming through this driveway and this gate over here.
so they're coming, they're taking a right after this last carport, and then a left into this area?
Correct.
Okay. You see that, John?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the regular 25-foot aisles. It doesn't look like they're,
So, but this wide open area is where you say, you see the cars parked randomly?
yeah, I
right
see the
there?
cars parked there.
Towards what, the docks? So these are main docks over here, and I don't know if there's any docks on the Jessica Bakery side, over this side, but I know there's a lot of activity in this back corner. On the north side as well? Yeah, and I think Jessica's Bakery has a dock. Yeah.
Okay.
So are those on the revised plan, that truck route to those docks as well, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Do the revised, I haven't looked at the revised plans yet that were submitted today. Are there truck lanes to those docks on today's plans? Okay.
We can add those.
And the north side of the building as well, there's a loading dock on the other side. At least one of them. I think they back in further to the east. Further up? Okay.
Lower right corner. Trucks coming in,
Yeah.
down in front of the first solar panel, and then they back up into
Okay.
I'm sorry, there was a question, I just couldn't hear.
Okay, I just asked if the revised plans show a truck route for tractor trailers to access the back loading docks that we just looked at, and there's another loading dock on the north side of the building.
We're just pulling that up.
Okay.
So, what are we looking at here? I feel like I'm losing control. Do we have do you have an answer to the question, or is it something you have to go off and, yeah?
On sheet 16, if I could walk over here for a moment. If you get sheet 16 open, you can see right above the words fire lane that we have a dashed line showing the actual truck route, which would come in, take that left-hand turn. That aisle width will be, I think it's 46 feet wide.
Now, that existing fire lane, that's in the back of the building from 125?
Yes. It's
Okay.
on the north side of the building. It's an existing fire lane.
And on the right-hand side over here would be the road from 125.
So if you could look at my plan for a moment. If you take this fire lane out, you're bringing it out to up here in the drawing.
So sheet number 16 shows the truck lane on the north side of the building. Is there also a truck lane identified on the south side of the building?
No, what I had mentioned a moment ago, we didn't show it on the south lane. I responded to Jean's question saying I would add that.
Okay, I'm
But
sorry.
now I'm showing you on the north side, we've done exactly what
Great.
she's asked for on the south side, on the north side, and it's extremely easy because the travel lanes are so wide there that the fire trucks can get in there, tractor trailers can get in there and back up to this area, this doorway over here. And I'll add that same detail to the south side.
And we have comparable lane widths on the south side as well?
Yes, you do. You actually have more width on the south side.
I would have noticed if you didn't mention it.
It's freezing.
It's freezing in here. I thought maybe that would get us to move along a little faster, so.
So,
okay.
so with respect to number 11, we're almost at the end of these, fortunately. So as it relates to the 150,000 square foot limit, we do not believe that the requirement for permitted use in the subzone to not exceed 150,000 square foot is applicable, because this is not a new development. It's merely adding electrical equipment on top of parking use or rooftop. But if the planning board is in disagreement, we respectfully request a waiver for this section.
So you're through that. I would ask our consultant here, who's been patiently waiting and listening, if there's any questions you would want to ask, not so much like an interpretation of their response to ours, but areas that where you would like additional information or clarity or things like that from them. Are there areas where you require more information from them?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the issues that I've heard tonight with respect to some of the responses, the question I would have, or the request for additional information beyond what they've provided, has to do with the lighting. What they've provided in the lighting is isometrics or light level plans for each light fixture underneath the carport. But the existing lighting out here is very tall mounted four lamp fixtures that are lighting up the entire parking lot. And the question would be, yes, under the carports, it appears they're covered, but what about the peripherals? That these tall lights might now be providing light to that the carport lighting will not hit on the exterior aisles, the circumference aisles, closer to the buildings or the bus shelters or what have you. So I think there needs to be a little bit more comprehensive isometric plan or isolux plan or photometric, integrating all of the lighting that's being taken out and all of this new lighting, and whether any supplemental lighting has to be also included in the plan.
If I may, for the record, just if you could identify yourself for the record.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates.
Thanks.
Other than that, I think a lot rests on the applicant's claim that this is not a building. In the applicability of a lot of the sections of the Bible. We can talk about landscaping and some of those issues. Our primary focus with regard to safety is maneuverability, and I have looked at the plans. They were emailed over to me yesterday, and I think they've made great strides into improving that maneuverability. There is a brand new regulation with regards to fire codes that just came out in January. And the fire departments are all grappling with that. The fire marshal's office has an engineer that's specifically for, her main focus is to deal with these issues, these fire access road and maneuverability issues and applicability of this new fire code. So the chief has gone to the right place to get some input on that. I defer to both the chief and to the fire marshal's office with regard to application of some of those requirements. But at the end of the day, it does look like the revisions that they've made have gone a long way to address a lot of those concerns that we had as far as getting fire trucks where they need to be, whether it's for access to the building or access to maybe a car fire onto one of these carports.
But you will respond as they have given you responses. You'll give your feedback on all the open issues.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you.
If I could just respond to that really briefly. My only concern in what Mr. Pesnola said, and there's nothing that he said, is that the fire chief is doing what's within his right, but the plans that he sent in for review are my old plans, not the new plans. So we need to find a way to get the new plans to him so that he can send them to the fire marshal and comment on the right set of plans, because they are vastly different from the plans that he had before.
Does the town have an electronic copy of these plans? Okay.
The new ones?
An electronic copy.
I'm sorry, yes, so I did send them directly to the fire department, but I sent those yesterday, but I must not have included Gene on that, so I'll make sure the town gets an electronic copy.
Okay, because I'd like an electronic copy. I find these cumbersome.
We
But didn't you just say that the chief did not have a set to send to the to send to the fire marshal?
I'm going to back off on that. I would ask that we make sure he's got the right set gets sent into the fire
because
marshal.
I spoke with Dan earlier, and he indicated he sent it to the chief yesterday, but I will confirm.
Okay, no, I just want clarification that he sent
Okay.
the right set in.
Yeah, it's, by the way, the plans are almost 36 megabytes or 27 megabytes and really hard to minimize, so we've been sending a Dropbox
Yep.
Link.
I'll
You
send
sent
you
a
a
link.
file request if you want. You can upload.
Thank you.
I know how to use file request Dropbox.
Perfect. With respect to number 12, we've addressed that, updating the plans for one section that was at 1 to 60. With respect to number 13, north arrows, we don't believe that north arrows are required on each sheet, although, but we've updated them to each sheet. Excuse me. Number 14, the contour intervals. Maybe I'll let Rick explain. Contour intervals are on each sheet. With respect to number 15, I've got to reread number 15, excuse me. With respect to number 15, we believe this requirement's not applicable because we're only contemplating attaching equipment to over existing property. And unless the planning board determines that it's required, we respectfully request a waiver. This is for identifying all the existing levels of all the structures on the site. With respect to number 16,
Stop you on that? I'm
Yes.
sorry. How are the carports going to, what's the grade change from the front of the carport to the back? If you're going to have it all 11 feet, there's a grade drop off, are they going to be tilted up, tilted down? From front of the property on the north, on the east side to the back of the property on the west side, it drops, the grade drops down. So is it 11 feet at the front and a level carport, or it is 11, or is it 11 feet And then when you get to the back of the corner of the carport, like 14 feet.
I'll let Rick answer that.
So that you do need the contours, because that's, you wouldn't be able to do that, those without contours, so.
The elevation at the front, here's my carport. This elevation's 11.1 feet off the ground. This elevation's 15.7 feet off of the ground.
So the question, Rick, is as you go from the front, from the east side of the parking lot, along the side of the building to the west side of the parking lot, are all of the carport, are all the solar panels going to be on the same plane, or are they going to follow the contour
No,
of
they're
the
following the
ground?
contour of the land.
Is that your question?
So the top, so they're level,
They're not level, they're following the contour of the land.
so then they are gonna be pitched towards the front of the property.
They'll be pitched whichever way the topography is, and the topography in all areas of these canopies is almost completely flat.
Okay.
I think pitch towards, if anything, pitch towards to the west.
I believe they are pitched towards the west, but
No, but the height at the back end is higher, which means that the slope is okay.
It's incredibly flat out there. Under any stretch of 100 to 200 feet, you'll be hard-pressed to find more than a couple feet of elevation difference. It's very, very flat in all the areas that we chose for the panels.
With respect to number 16, we have we don't believe this is applicable because it's looking for, again, a plan of the building, the front face of the building. You can't see the solar panels on the building. We don't believe it's applicable. With number 17, I'll ask Rick to speak to this, please.
So actually, 17 is what I addressed earlier, and I think that was clarified in the letter from Jennifer at Conservation to the board tonight. I don't think it needs further explanation other than there is an existing order of conditions that covers all the wetlands within our purview, and she has unequivocally stated that where those wetlands are valid through, I don't remember the date, but it's 2018, and we're clearly outside of all those resource areas.
With respect to number 18, we've discussed that for access ways for semi-trailers and fire trucks, and they've been marked on the plans. With respect to comment number 19, it's our intention that all proposed handicap spaces will be ADA compliant. It's our intention to provide details at the building permit stage and during the construction document preparation phase. And it's our belief that during the site visits, that can be accomplished, based on our site visits, that can be accomplished easily.
If I could further add to that, we have visited all of these spaces, and again, they're extremely flat, so I don't think the ability to provide handicap access is in question. I think it was appropriately pointed out. Actually, one of the things that Mr. Pesnola and I talked about is on the south side of the building on the previous set of plans, I believe I had proposed 10 handicap parking spaces, and one of his comments was there's an existing handicap ramp that's not shown there. And it's actually pretty interesting, the entranceway to the building where those 10 handicap spaces are is not handicap accessible, yet there's a bus drop-off spot there. So what I proposed to Mr. Pesnola is to keep 3 for the bus drop-off and move the other 7 to an existing parking lot over, and there's already 3 or 4 existing handicap spaces there, and add the other 6 or 7 right next to it, restripe this entire line. There's a sidewalk here, and this goes into the building where there is an ADA accessible entranceway.
How did you figure out the number of spaces? Isn't it based on, like, square footage of the building?
No, actually, we're relocating handicap spaces that we were changing from because of our layout.
So there's other handicap spaces on site?
Many.
Many, okay.
With respect to site comments, in the number one, with respect to the photographs that we're taking, we're talking about patching and repaired that area where there's potholes that have been obviously pointed out. They will be patched and repaired. With respect to the electric car charging area, we've updated the plans to show the parking spaces and restriping for that area, which is up on the northern side in the center there. With respect to relocation of handicap parking, as we've just addressed that. With respect to the existing filling station, which was on the south, this is one area of modules that we relocated, which is the area right there in the center of the screen, was moved to the roof. With respect to a damaged guardrail right behind that, the facility will repair the guardrail. With respect to the gatehouse that was shown on the plans, the gatehouse is going to be removed from the plans. And with respect to the tractor-trailer school, we've discussed that already this evening. So that answers the comments received to date with respect to the peer review. And
So, just so that we're clear, this is the first chance our peer review has had to see these, so they have, and I think 2 points I would make is that they will be in the process of responding to these comments and these changes to see if they answer the point. We can't tell. And there are some areas that still of disagreement between our peer review consultant's interpretation of the bylaw and what's in there and your interpretation of it. So I want the record to show that there is a disagreement. Our peer review consultant believes one thing, you believe a different thing. So,
yes, sir.
okay. So when will, let's see, is there any more information that you are going to be providing our peer review consultants that you have not provided yet?
Yes, we will be having discussions, as Rick mentioned earlier, about the drainage with the peer review. And with respect to questions that, if the fire chief still had unanswered questions, we'd be responding to those as well.
Okay.
There were some things that where we hadn't heard from. The police department,
Police, DPW.
health. I mean, I'm not sure that,
Yeah, okay. So, with that in mind, whither go we next, I guess, on this? Yeah, okay.
Where we go next, I'd invite up Attorney Rosen to discuss the next step with respect to next steps.
Before you remark, I don't know if there's anybody here. I know people in the back have been patiently listening, and we always give the public a chance to express their opinion if anybody is interested in speaking, and it looks like a gentleman here is, so I will, if you could come up to the mic, identify yourself, and we'll see what we can do and get some feedback for you. So, Dan, if you could let this gentleman speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Larry McHugh. I live on 136 Castlemere Place, and I'm a citizen of North Andover who voted in May of 2007 for the original master plan for this site. That was also a time when the plan was for a mixed use of that site. I'm sure you're all familiar with those plans. Many people were very active in support of that plan at the time. Thank you. That's a good picture of the site. It also included landscaping plan, mixed use. It had residential. It had 4 retail buildings, future plans for a railroad station, and it would have been a very vibrant part of our community. We also went to the state for tax increment financing at that time and received that tax increment financing, and I believe the town received the first $600,000 tranche of that financing. And that was, and we needed to meet certain milestones in order to qualify for that. And I believe there was another $1.9 million in financing that was available as we proceeded on this plan. As a citizen, I'm very disappointed that this never happened. And I'm here to ask this committee not to do anything in this new plan that stands in the way of what I consider as a citizen of this town and this state the highest and best use for this site. The original plan on the south side of this building called for a very large retail building, okay? That was, I don't know what retail company is going to move in there when their storefronts are not visible because there's 6 acres of carport solar cells in front of that retail building. So I think the current plan makes it very difficult for that retail building to be built and occupied. On the north side of the building, if you look over there, there were originally 3 other retail buildings shown. The L-shaped one and the other 2 were 3. Now in the new plan, there's only 1 there. And you know, you have some of the same issues, only not as critical. Solar cells are fine. I don't have any problem with solar cells, and I don't think anyone in this town has a problem with solar cells. If you can put solar cells up on carports to bridge over parking spaces with 11 to 17-foot height, I don't know why you can't put solar cells on the roof of a 1.2 million square foot building roof, which is where most people put solar cells. And if you need to bridge over air conditioning and mechanical equipment, it's probably going to even be easier to do it on the roof. Each and every one of these buildings that was in that original plan also has a roof. And if we proceed with that plan, and we do everything in this town to do so, we will continue to open up additional roof space as we increment through that plan. And my position is real simple. Don't do anything on this site that hinders the progress of that plan. And that's what we're asking the committee. I could go into some more details. I don't know how that fell apart. I was an enthusiastic supporter of the plan. I voted for it in town meeting, as did the majority of the citizens of this town that were in attendance. And I think that's a loud voice that needs to be heard. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, Don, did you want to speak? Yeah.
Donald Stewart, 52 Prospect Street. I'd like to start by thanking you for all your service. It's not an easy job I've been doing for 20 years serving the town. My question is, and none of this has been brought up, there's solar all over town. Every other house has solar. And because this project is so big, and I think the board was concerned about adjustments and where to put all the solar on the property, Does anybody know what the benefit to the town is? Do you have any idea? Well, part of the thing is that it's going to give the town a special rate for all electricity for every building in town. It's going to bring in thousands of dollars of new taxes for every building in town. We're talking probably $500,000 to $600,000 a year extra revenue for this town. And these are the kind of things that happen why we don't hear this override chant every year now, because we're doing this kind of stuff. There is concerns about people where they put these things, and I understand that. You know, I think they made some adjustments. We had some concerns on the board, but a lot of this stuff wasn't brought up to my colleagues on the board. They didn't know what the situation was. But I mean, just to get a special rate for electricity for every building in town, it's got to be a couple $100,000 a year. I mean, so I mean, you've got a tough job. I mean, I don't advocate either way. I'm a Scotsman. I think of money first. You know, so thank you very much.
The site gets developed like a 40R, like Market Street in Linfield, it would bring in more than a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
So with tax revenue.
It's
plus-
talking.
Yeah.
We're talking tax revenue. We're talking savings electricity. We're talking $600,000 to $700,000.
We're talking
Well,
millions.
the question, Don, is
So-
ask how much we get on that facility today compared to what we got it under the Lucent days and what we would get, as Lynn said, you know.
Because the property has done nothing since the Lucent days. It's just the economy hasn't allowed it to happen. And I understand the gentleman with the plan that was there to do. They've been trying to do it, but
Yeah, well,
nothing.
I mean, to a large degree, we understand that logic, and we could agree or disagree with it about what's the best option. Our jurisdiction is, I think, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
But, well, thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah. Okay.
So I guess two things. You know, where are we going next? And I'll get to that in a minute, but I do want to correct some misinformation of record. There's some misinformation that came out at the Selectmen's meeting on Monday night, and there's some misinformation that's been presented tonight as well that I believe needs to be clarified of the record. Okay? The master plan is not a contract. The master plan is part of an overlay district. The use of the property is governed by the underlying zoning, and the underlying zoning of the property is I-2. And in addition, the overlay district of 40R within the business opportunity zone specifically allows solar. We went through the process with the ZBA. We filed appropriate papers. We asked for 5 determinations, and we got a favorable finding of all 5 of them. We understand that there's a master plan. We understand that people voted for it at a town meeting, and that people would like to move forward with some elements of residential and retail. It is not a contractual obligation. It is not a requirement under zoning. It is merely an allowable overlay district. That being said, as to that particular point, we specifically, if you could put the last picture up that you had on that shows the buildings. Okay. Solar is not being built here. It is not being built here or here. It's being built here, 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 and here. It's not being built where the buildings are on the 40R plans, number one. Number two, you asked earlier tonight, is it designed such that it can be removed and lifted and placed on top of a building? The difference in putting the solar in claws, in carports, as opposed to just putting it on the ground, is going to be $3 to $4 million additional cost and expense. The applicant, the owner of the property, is willing to spend that money and do it in a way that the panels can be lifted and placed on top of a building at a future date. If a tenant, if a builder, if a developer wishes to come and explore this property and build on this property. So to the first point, master plan, it's overlay, we have our zoning approval, and the underlying zoning is I-2, which includes manufacturing. This is an allowed use. But despite that, we're designing it in a way that it doesn't interfere with the 40R, if and to the extent there becomes a possibility or a reality. Okay.
So if someone were to come along and want to put a Target.
Sure. To your question, who would...
You'd lift the panels up and put them on top of the Target roof.
I believe the question was asked, what retailer would even consider coming here with all these carports? Well, first of all, there aren't 6 acres of carports in front of this retail building, okay? Call Whole Foods, okay? Ask Whole Foods.
Yeah, I know.
If they would come here, they would love to have solar carports. They're putting them in front of their buildings. They see value in it. They're a green company. It's what they want to do. So if that opportunity came around, we would do it. If Whole Foods didn't want to come here, but say Trader Joe's wanted to come here, who, by the way, I've approached on numerous occasions to see if they would be interested, okay? If somebody like Trader Joe's came here and said, we'd love to, but we don't want the carports in front of our building, put them on the roof, my client has stated tonight, Monday night in front of the Board of Selectmen as well, we would agree to a condition that says lift them and put them on the roofs. Happy to do it. Okay. The second, the TIF is not financing for the town. The TIF is a tax incentive program that's provided to an applicant to encourage growth and development at a particular piece of property. The TIF for this particular piece of property was designed to encourage manufacturing. The language in this TIF had nothing to do with the retail or the residential development. Read the TIF. It was to promote manufacturing. Monday night, it was stated on the record that the applicant hadn't taken advantage of the TIF and hadn't spent the money and invested in this property to further the TIF. That's wrong. The applicant was required to spend $20 million over 20 years at a rate of $1 million a year. The applicant was required to submit...
I guess, where are you going with this?
I want to answer the concerns raised by some of the abutters about how there was a tax incentive financing program that provided $600,000 to the town, but didn't fulfill its obligation to provide another $1.9 million. It's a false statement, and I would like the record to properly reflect that. That's not correct. So... It was just said 30 seconds ago, and it repeats...
You're going into confrontational mode again. I don't know why. You're raising your voice, and you're getting very agitated. Please, let's dial it down, because there's arguably a difference of opinion about personal policy objectives. I don't think there's factual errors. There's a disagreement from a public policy perspective. So let's... finish your point, and let's move on to the next thing, because I think...
That's all I ask, is the chance to finish my point without interruption. That's all I ask. Okay? The applicant's required to spend $1 million a year on this property for the next 20 years. We're 10 years into the TIF agreement. In the first 10 years, the applicant spent over $14 million on the redevelopment of this property. Financial statements are filed with the state in each and every year. So I do want to correct the misinformation where there's some indication or some belief that the applicant isn't actually spending money and trying to redevelop this property. It's not true, and the statements are filed with the state and with the town, and they show $14 million in expenditures in the last 10 years. Okay? The tranche, the $600,000 of financing, was not a tranche of financing related to the TIF. The town got a payment from the state for the 40R. They got a $600,000 payment. The other numbers that were being talked about were potential permitting fees that might come to fruition if a developer built on the site and paid sewer connection and other costs and expenses related to the development of the 530 units, all of which are not being impacted by the project that is in front of you. It's still there. If a developer wants to come and build 530 units, they will pay all of the other amounts. Doing this project is not in any way, shape, manner, or form deviating from that contract or that agreement. It's there. So I just want everyone to be aware that by doing this, you're not giving away anything that people are stating is being given away. It's not correct.
You're veering from facts now to interpretation about how you put the facts together, because I think somebody could make a compelling argument to disagree with you on that. That's not within our jurisdiction, so let's move on.
Okay. I hope that you see this evening that over the last several meetings, we have taken your considerations into concern. We've thought about them. I'm sorry, your concerns into consideration. We've thought about them. We've implemented changes on the plans. We've met with the Board of Selectmen. We listened to what they had to say. We met with the ZBA. We listened to what they had to say. We continue to be willing to sit and meet and talk and put together reasonable restrictions, conditions, configurations, so long as that in doing so, it does not derogate from our right under 40A to build this project. So we have two thoughts, and our two thoughts are this. We need to get this done, and we need to get signed up so that we don't lose the obligation to participate in the net metering queue. We would give an extension because we understand that the peer review was hired late. We understand that the materials were submitted to the other boards not too long ago, and we're just now incorporating everybody's comments. We would be willing to give a short extension to the next meeting, which I believe is the 20th, with additional time beyond the 20th for you to write a decision and close out the hearing. Alternatively, we would also consider bifurcating the decision. And by that I mean, if this board would consider approving the project, but with a reservation of rights to put together the conditions based upon all of the issues that have been raised, we would agree to stay in front of this board, subject to the jurisdiction of this board, to deal with those conditions. But by giving us the approval and acknowledging that the project has been approved subject to conditions that you would set forth, we can move forward with our negotiations with the town and by entering into our hosting agreement and our net metering agreement so that we can make sure that we don't lose the right to do this project. For that, we would give an additional 45 days, plus additional time to write a decision that would give everybody the time.
I have no idea what that means. I don't, you're asking us to approve it?
Approve the project, and then they'll negotiate the terms after the fact.
We can't do that, so.
Okay, so then we're prepared to sign an extension till the hearing on the 20th with a decision date of the 27th.
I don't think the 20th is enough. We haven't even, we got the materials tonight. I really think they need to be reasonable on this, you know. The peer review, you did make a comment, they were hired late, but you did ask us not to send it to peer review, so we need more time.
No, we didn't. No, we never asked that it not go to peer review.
Back in March? Absolutely.
Back when this was filed for appeal, and we had a conversation on the phone, do you want me to hold off on sending it to peer review? And you said yes. That's not separate from distributing it to other boards, but yes. Back when, I don't have the date of when the building inspector said that the use was not allowed and you were going to file an appeal.
I know.
So
I don't know.
That's fine, but it was put on hold at that point because you were going to file an appeal, and at that time, we had a discussion about whether it should go to peer review at this time, and you said no.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the process we went through, first of all, this is, the amount of time we've spent on this is totally unprecedented in terms of how many hours of hearing that we've had tonight and in the last meeting. So we put a lot of time in. We let you talk as much as you wanted in, as much detail as you wanted. We're at the point where we got a new set of plans tonight, and our normal practice would be next time we would hope to clear up most of the issues, but still have a few things remaining, and then wait to the next meeting, close out the remaining items, close the public hearing, and vote the decision that evening. You're accelerating that well beyond what we normally do. And that's why I agree with Lynn, is we would really prefer the next meeting after that, because that's what it's going to, I mean, we just got the plans tonight. I don't see how we can, in one meeting, be in the position where everything is done.
From our perspective, and recognizing and appreciating the position that you guys are in, and appreciating that you've allowed us to take this one step at a time over the last couple of months. If you could look at it from the applicant's perspective, we met with the town in December of 2014. We did a preliminary meeting and review in February of 2015. We took in comments made at that meeting where departments were invited to participate. We then filed an application in March of 2015. So at this point, we have been working on this project for 10 and a half months. Every time we go before a different board, we get a different set of comments. We get different changes, and we unfortunately were held up by a mistake that was made, by a determination by a town official that told us that it wasn't an allowed use and sidetracked us for almost 4 months, where we had to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it cost everybody time. We are perilously close to potentially having a risk that we will not be able to proceed with the project that we're intending to proceed with. I totally understand the time constraints that you are under, but I would also respectfully suggest that we are also under them, and that we have not had I don't know how to politically or tactfully say this, so I'm not going to, okay? So let me suggest this, okay? Why don't I give you till the 20th and the 27th? We will be here on the 20th and the 27th, hopefully making as much progress.
That's 2 meetings?
No, you don't have a meeting on the 6th. You changed it till tonight. The way the Osgood is written, the decision is due on the last hearing. What we have done with you for all of our meetings so far is we have extended to write the decision for a week after the hearing, because the Osgood does not have a traditional time frame built into it to write a decision. So we've done that on each extension that I've worked on, the last 3. We do a meeting, and then we give you an additional week to write the decision. So what I'm suggesting is the 20th and the 27th, and what we would do is hopefully make as much progress between tonight and that meeting as we made between tonight and the prior meeting. And we will hope that maybe we can get it done that evening, but that if we make reasonable progress and it needs another 2 weeks at that point in time, we would be open to discussing it at that point in time. We just want to keep everybody moving full speed.
I think they need to get rid of half their waivers, at least half. I don't agree with landscaping. I mean, you gotta fix up the property. You gotta put the landscape aisles in like the bylaw says. You're changing the parking. I think everybody's in agreement. We've said that to you the last 3 meetings.
And we've said for the last 3 meetings that we don't believe we need to do that because it's an existing site, it's existing conditions, and we're not changing the conditions on the site. And under 40A, Section 3, unless it's health, safety, or welfare, you don't have the right to regulate it.
Welfare.
So, just a point of clarification on the definitions. We're saying there's no new development here, but look at the definition for development. So I'm just asking as a point of clarification that I don't quite...
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess my thinking a little bit is Liz actually sort of coaching you on how best to get us to yes here. And you take a calculated risk in terms of the waivers, and there's an awful lot of them. And in some cases, I agree that it's really more non-NA than it is a waiver. But if some of these you got to address. You may want to. Certain ones not budge on, but boy, other ones, I just don't understand why you're digging your heels in the sand.
Again, by the example that I made earlier tonight, we didn't have to do anything when we put ACT in, okay? But by the strict interpretation that is being made of the Osgood bylaw, at the time we put ACT in, every single one of these requirements would have applied. Because it says anytime you make an application under Osgood, you have to follow 1711, 1 through...
Well, I guess here's the thing, and you can pretty much figure it out, which ones are hardcore ones and which ones are not, and some of them are more material than others to you. But if you just basically say carte blanche, it's all waivers, I think you got a bigger hurdle getting through this board than if you address some of them. If you don't want to, then, I mean...
Three meetings ago, we came in and we said everything's a waiver, approve our plan. We then went back out and we put in pedestrian walkways.
Well,
We
but
did-
well, let's go back on that, because after all, you would acknowledge this process resulted in a lot of changes, much of which is good and much of which has resulted in something that is better than what you started with. So,
But at the same time, you have to acknowledge under 48, Section 3, unless it's health, safety, or welfare.
Okay.
And I'm going to point out, I'm going to point out one thing. For the second time, this town had a warrant article that dealt with solar. For the second time, you warrant.
Excuse me, we read the memo, please, can we not, you've sent 2 letters on it, can we not go over that again tonight? It's already 10 minutes of 10. Can we progress with this project, not an old warrant article?
The 20th, the meeting's on the 20th, we go to the 27th. Are you okay with that, or do you want to basically, the choice is either voting on it tonight with where we are or accepting the extension to the 20th, even though we've told the applicant we want another meeting beyond that? I mean,
Well, what I heard the applicant say was that on the 20th, if we need another meeting, there's an opportunity for that. So,
Now we'll have to vote then.
you know, and if not, then we have to go with what we have. Okay, so,
Now, I have one more question of the applicant. At the selectmen meeting, the applicant did say they would look at moving the panels out front, out back, as many as possible is up to the roof, and the only one that I see that was moved was one on the side, which was in the way of a truck access lane. So I just asked that the applicant look at that again per their own comments to the selectmen and what they agreed to do, so.
We will
No, you don't have to answer that tonight. I'm just telling you. So,
are you going to give us this extension in writing? So,
I will sign it right now.
okay, so,
My opinion is, I mean, if we have to make a decision based on what we're going to discuss at the next meeting and vote on it then, and have nothing in writing to vote on, negative.
Sorry,
I want to see what we're going to vote on at the next and we won't know that until after
until
the
we're at
next
the
meeting.
next meeting.
So we have to have an extension beyond it to the meeting after the next meeting, which I'm prepared to vote.
You don't do deliberative sessions, or you won't do, I don't understand.
our practice is that we do not vote the decision. We have the decision in hand, and we go through and edit it and then vote on it. We do not vote and then file the decision separately.
So what you're saying is an extension to close the hearing on the 20th with an extension to render the decision by the 3rd?
No, it's basically.
It would be the day after the 3rd, obviously, because you would have to vote on it and then stamp it into the clerk.
Yes. Another day or two after that, but it would be, whatever is the first meeting in October, we would
November.
end up a couple days later, 2 or 3 days later
When's
filing.
election day?
Yeah.
When's election day?
There isn't one, I think, this year.
But we wouldn't be scheduled for a meeting if there was one on that day.
I don't think there is
That's
an
right.
election day in November.
I don't
5
believe it's
years.
Massachusetts.
what's it take 20 minutes to figure out an extension date?
Gene, do you happen to have the calendar for the year on the website?
Yeah, well, what is it, I mean, would it,
The planning board meeting?
Yeah.
It's on the town website. I'll have that. It's the first Tuesday, is it second
Yeah,
or
it's
third?
the 3rd.
Third.
It's the 3rd of November. John, can we also discuss submitting this material? I mean, there has to be time to review it prior to the October 20th meeting, and typically all material is submitted by the Wednesday prior to, so that we can understand it before the meeting.
We're not comments from the stuff that was handed out tonight now. We haven't had a chance to read it.
Understanding that we just got the peer review comments
Correct.
on Sunday, and we turned it as quick as we could on Sunday after trying to address as many of the things as we can. So if we want to have an agreement that the peer review will come and meet with my clients so that they can do these items in a face-to-face meeting, so that we don't have to spend 5 days going this way and 5 days going this way, we would be more than happy, and again, we're paying for the peer review consultants, we're more than happy to have them. But if you remember back 3 meetings ago, when you asked for the first extension, and I said, so long as we please hire the peer review consultants the next day, We hired Lisa a week later, and we hired Hancock 2.5 weeks later. I am imploring you, if we agree that we can get them in a room and have face-to-face so that we can do this together, and it won't waste your time either. It means the hearing will be productive. We will get in here, and Hancock and Meridian will be on the same page. Ann and Lisa will be on the same
I
page.
believe they're willing to meet with you. Okay, can we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Doesn't
I
have to be
mean,
a 20-minute.
what's stopping that from happening?
Nothing, David, just let.
Process,
Okay.
process.
Will you do it? Sure. And Eggleston?
Okay.
Rick
What's-
just showed me, he Googled something, and he shows an election day on November 3rd. So I don't have the planning board schedule with me.
I have it down for the rest of the.
You have it? Okay.
I have a.
So we do show it, but if a state election has been scheduled, then typically we do not hold a public hearing on a state election day.
Right.
So
Do you, like tonight's meeting, do you make it up on a different date, or do you just cancel
We
it?
usually
First time we
cancel
do
it,
on a different
right.
date.
It's usually canceled, so.
So, well,
Is there a law
I don't-
saying we
that's-
can't meet on election day?
There is.
Yeah,
There is,
I
and-
believe there is, because
Public hearings cannot be held on the day of a state election, and there's one next year on September 20th. It's, we have next year scheduled to review today, so.
well, let's, I'll tell you what we will do is, you check on that tomorrow. Let's take the extension to the next meeting, but bear in mind that there's a very strong likelihood that we're not going to have everything we want then, and we'll have the same discussion again. And
understood.
So, with that in mind, does somebody want to make a motion to accept the extension till our October 20th meeting with the time to render a decision to October 27th?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made. Any discussion? What's that?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Thank you, I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
We still have stuff to go over.
yeah, I know.
This is ridiculous. 20 minutes to come up with a date.
Yeah. I hope
Yeah.
I hope some of the
It's
other
one thing
people
let them go
stuck
through the
around.
contents, but something like.
Well, I've run into this before.
Mr. Smolak usually manages to avoid these discussions and arrive just as the time's up.
Okay, let's, thank you very much for coming, we appreciate it. And thank you, everybody in the back, for your patience. I'm sure you learned all sorts of useful things tonight.
Yep.
Okay, moving back to where we were. Where are we, Gene? God, I lost my agenda, I'm so excited.
You won't, John, you won't have materials on this, so I have it electronic.
He's looking for his agenda.
I'm looking for my agenda.
Sorry, zero.
Do we have the signed thing yet? Did we get that?
He said he'd sign it right now, I didn't.
Oh, sign it and bring it back. We want the extension. George, this is like the old days, back in the 80s here. Yeah.
They motioned October 20th with the time to render decision to October 27th.
Hold them and give you extra time tomorrow if you tell me that you're not meeting that day.
Okay, that's not what they
Oh,
motioned.
we're not meeting on the 3rd, it's for the 20th. Okay, I got you. I'll bring it right back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
In the meantime, I don't know what.
I have everything electronically, and it's been sent to them, but if you want to hand out hard copies, that's fine.
We got some copies.
So,
And the thing is, first, my name is George Sharenda, and I have my business card. You want to sell your house?
Hi, George, how you doing?
How you doing? And that last meeting was too long. You know, I run meetings myself, and I'm the chairman of the Old Center Historical District Commission. I want you to tell you that
You wouldn't let someone go about their own business instead of going to the subject at point?
well, you know, you're talking about solar panels. The Old Center, the North Church, they want to put solar panels on the North Church. I have a meeting coming up on the 22nd, a public meeting, to decide how we're going to handle that. So it'll be
So
interesting.
we'll have to see if that runs afoul of what we gave them, because we gave them all the money for the steeple, that, whether
Right,
that's going to
right.
run afoul of that, so. All righty.
Okay.
What do we
All
got
right,
here?
here we are.
So, John,
Again, my name is George Sharenda. I live at 91 Quail Run in North Andover, and I'm here to try and get some help. I have a situation here that I have tried to go to the Board of Appeals, I have tried to go to the Planning Board, and I have not been able to get answers to do what I need to do. What I have here is a piece of land, which I showed you, which is a Lot 5 on Essex Street.
okay, everybody, I'm sorry, George, so here's the locus, everybody comfortable with what this lot is? It's the Brooks, I'm sorry, the Great Pond Road bend is right to the lower.
This is on the hill, right?
This is a significant hill going up to the, you see there's two,
There's power lines right along the straight line there. Goes past it.
yes.
Correct. The
So
power lines are in Boxford.
Yeah, yeah.
This section.
So we're going to move to an A&R next, but on that A&R, two of the houses are constructed, one at the very top of the hill and one across from the lot that George is here to discuss. So, okay, so
Okay.
everybody gets the locus, right?
So we're talking about the one that's right on the.
The one that's outlined in
yeah,
yellow. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, it's on the Boxford line. In fact, part of the land is in Boxford. And before John Simon was on the board, in 1973 or 4,
Yeah.
this plan was approved by the Planning Board of North Andover under Form A. Since then, two changes have come in on the zoning. The first change was this land went from R2, which is 1 acre zoning, to R1, which is 2 acre zoning, which again, this does have the 2 acre zoning, but with that change, they also increased the frontage from 150 feet to 175 feet, and it does not have 175 feet. So one issue is the frontage. We don't have the frontage, and we need to go someplace to get it. Either through you, which again, the previous town planner said I should come to this board. My opinion, I think I have to go to the Board of Appeals. But the other thing is the common driveway. This driveway was put in before they changed the zoning on common driveways. This driveway was put in with the intention to service 3 homes. 2 of them have been built, and this lot does not have a home on it.
Which now, Lot 5 doesn't, or? the
Lot
3
5
and
is the
1?
one I'm talking about. Lot 2 is serviced by the common driveway, and Lot 4 is serviced by the common driveway. And in the packet that I gave you, when Lot 2 was sold, the person that owned all the land put into the deed the restrictions that said that the common driveway would be there, how would they take care of the expenses, and also added, if you read the terminology, that the expenses would change once somebody built on Lot 5. So as we move forward, the person bought this land in 1975. The situation is such that in year 2000, unfortunately, he took it out of his name and his wife's name and put it into his name alone. If he had not done that, I've been told that this lot would be grandfathered today, and I wouldn't be here. I will tell you that eventually, I think it's going to have to come back because of it's in the, not the wetlands, but watershed area. So eventually, it's got to come back to you anyways, and I need a clarification, number one, on the common driveway, which I would think is still grandfathered, but I can't get results. And number two, where I would go, because the frontage does not have the new requirement under R1.
So you've got a dimensional problem, and you want to access this lot over the common driveway? What,
Correct.
Because it's a steep hill?
No, mainly because there's a brook in the front.
Yeah.
There's a
So
book of- Oh, you can't cross over the,
they would have to go to conservation, so I've talked to Jennifer, she could permit it, but it would be a filing with her as well. So the issue is, they have easement language, it appears to be in place for passage and repassage for all these lots. So when it was,
Right, it was back in the day where basically you created a subdivision road and didn't follow any of the requirements for
Yeah,
it. I
and-
mean, that's really what it came
right,
down
and
to.
so the common driveway bylaw went in '89, I believe. And so this driveway today services 2 lots already. The common driveway permit can only service 2. But, so which supersedes which? So the deeds say that they have right to pass and maintain. Then the common driveway went in, the house changed ownership in 2000.
It really didn't change, it went from 2 to 1.
Yeah.
It's still the same owner, and unfortunately, under mass law, that says it no longer is grandfathered.
Yeah.
So-
But on the other hand, in my opinion, and I don't know, and that's why I'm here, because I can't get a,
So
I mean-
you're looking for a potential way to solve the problem so this house can be built on this
Correct.
lot? Okay, so,
So as far as
I
the
think-
watershed, it's, from the lower wetlands, it's more than 500 feet away. So
Yeah.
that would put the general zone.
is
I know that-
this the wetlands, this
Yeah,
thing?
all the way
okay.
across the bottom. There are wetlands somewhere to the top up here as well, so we don't have a delineation yet.
Yeah,
So we don't know, in
so-
terms of permitting in the watershed, it may or may not be the case.
What I would say with this is let's sort of all, sort of our own, put our thinking caps on about, is there a way to deal with this? Yeah, 'cause-
Well, I guess if there's a way to use the existing driveway, it's certainly less impactful, but
Right.
there's a butters, and
yeah, we just don't, the problem is we don't, our common driveway bylaw only has 2, with
right,
good reason. Yeah.
right.
but this is a common driveway that was in before.
But you're adding a third.
However, when it was put in for 3 homes. Just unfortunately, one hasn't been built yet.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Yeah.
But
What date was,
Sort of like an expired permit, you know, you get a permit
Well-
that's only good for 2 years,
Yeah.
and
well, that's
what date was that set? The common,
well, the common driveway was in. Basically, when this plan was recorded in 1975, I believe, of 1974, March of 1974. I have a bigger copy of it.
if this was set in before the law limited it to 2.
Transfer the property, yeah.
But, and the problem is, it's still in the same person's name today than it was in when Mrs. Burns sold it to Dr. Scully. And the problem is, it was in both the husband and wife, and now it's only in the husband's name.
But this is really just giving the right to use the common driveway. It's not, don't know whether that would be covered by the,
You can't, there is no officially zoning permitted common driveway that sits here, so.
Other than the 2.
Yeah, I mean, what was there was probably not even a formal thing, I bet. It wasn't even, there's probably a private thing, but there was no permit requirement for it.
what's the road width on the driveway?
Say again?
What's the road width on the driveway?
I don't know.
See, that's a big thing. When you stop
on
putting
here.
houses on the
Yeah.
common driveway, you
Yeah.
can't get a fire.
So
exit out.
what I would say is let's everybody think about it and we could talk
Okay.
about it.
what, how much road frontage actually exists in Boxford?
How much frontage? It's a little over 150 feet of frontage on this lot.
Right, yeah, I see that, but how much of it is in Boxford?
Oh, very little. I mean,
Enough for a driveway?
No.
Great.
Okay, good, okay, next.
it's a little over 6 feet. 6.6
Yeah.
feet.
Not enough.
Okay, moving right along.
How do I go to get permission?
We will think about it. I don't think we have an answer for you right now.
Well, that's
But
the
we
problem
will,
I've had
we'll-
since-
We'll, as we always used to say, we'll take the matter under advisement.
I hope I don't have to
God,
wait
this
as
is a
long
long
the next
time ago. I don't even see Hedstrom's name on it or Jay
No,
Burke.
no, this is way
Yeah,
back.
Yeah,
And to be honest with you, I sold them the land way back then, so I've been around a long time.
there you go, yeah.
But- And again, I do have a couple of people here, but I don't think I need to speak yet, because we need to know how
Yeah,
I get this
mean,
approved.
we'll have to think about it a little bit, I don't know the answer, and are there any other plans that show topography and contours or anything, or is this the only thing you got?
That's the only thing I got.
Okay.
And the bottom line is, once I get it approved, we'll have to come back with all that to put a home
Well,
on
it
it.
depends.
But
It depends on the circumstances.
Right.
It depends on what the answer is.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay.
thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks, Gene. You told me it'd be an hour and a half.
I would never venture a guess.
Well, it's, yeah, that's not on us. So who's next? Who's
Okay,
next?
so 57 Water Street is here to request a waiver of site plan review. John Smolak is here to represent the applicant. Here is the locus. Most people may remember the parcel as being a location of Pumpernickel's Restaurant several years ago, Eats Restaurant, and most recently, I think it's been closed for a year to two, there was a caterer at this location on Water Street. So that gives you a sense of the zoning is within the downtown overlay, within general business. It's directly across the street from the end of the mills on Water Street,
Yep, I know exactly where
and
it is.
it's at the corner of
So,
Brown Court.
Ken,
Okay.
Well, I promise I won't take 2.5 hours.
good. Bless
So,
you.
but John Smolak, attorney for Cindy Robinson. Cindy Robinson is here with me this evening. Gene has provided a good summary of the issue. Basically, this site was used historically for restaurant use, as you're aware of, and as a result of the change in use to a catering use over the past couple of years, it's lost its grandfathering as to the parking. So what we need to request from the board is a determination that the parking that's on street can be used to satisfy the parking requirements for this proposed use, which is a restaurant use. And secondly, request site plan review waiver based on circumstances that basically very little is changing on the exterior of the site. So the site itself is only 5,000 square feet in size. It's really small. If you look at the letter and the photographs attached to the letter, you'll get a better visual as to the site itself. The site currently has 3 structures on it, one of which is what you see as the restaurant area, above which is a rental unit. To the rear of the site is a second rental unit and a storage shed that's about 375 or 400 square feet into the rear. So the only changes that are being made are the changes to the use in the first floor, which is the existing restaurant area. The proposal is to convert it to a cafe for breakfast and lunch, and it's basically an extension of what we've been trying to advocate for with the redevelopment of the West Mill and East Mill, and try to extend the redevelopment down this corridor and bring this area back to productive use. So basically, through parking calculations, the site requires 22 parking spaces. It never has had 22 parking spaces. The new parking requirements that went in require 15 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and the restaurant uses 1,350 square feet. And the 2 rental dwelling units or accessory units require 1 space each, so it requires 22. We can get 3 spaces on site, including 1 handicap space on site. And so under the parking table, under the zoning bylaws, there's a footnote. Footnote 7 provides that in circumstances where a site is located off of Water Street in this area, in the historic area, that the planning board can make a determination of adequate parking by using the on-site parking on Water Street. So that's what we're requesting the board to consider. It's probably not inconsistent with what you did with Heavenly Donuts in terms of parking and so on. And so on the one hand, we're requesting the board to determine that there are 19 spaces on Water Street that could be used for this establishment. And that's the first question. The second question is whether the board would be willing to entertain a waiver of site plan review. The only exterior changes that are occurring are basically the repair and reconstruction of the front stairway, deck area, to a point where it's no closer to the existing setback. In addition to that, there's going to be added a handicap accessible ramp that'll come in from the right hand of the building as you look from from Water Street. That'll access to the rear of the site. And other than that, some striping of parking. Those are the only exterior changes. There'll be a change in the awning. This is subject to the Old Center Historic District Commission review anyway, so we'll go through that review as well, assuming the board is... Machine Shop Village. Historic District, Conservation District. So basically, we are scheduled for that to occur next, or actually later this month, for that review. And so we don't think there are any really adverse impacts. It's an historic use that's been here for years and years. And so we're requesting the board to approve a waiver of site plan.
Were you going to say something? Okay. Pete?
I tell you, anything you can do to improve the looks of that building is
It
going to
used to be a
really
good
benefit.
restaurant back in the day,
Yeah.
right?
Is there any way to get anything in the front of the building to break up the landscaping, even if it's some sort of concrete pots? It looks like there's like you're going to have 3 steps, so you have 7, 8-inch, at least 8, 16,
Yeah.
24.
It's very tight.
But even like a planter or something, something.
That's exactly what we're planning to do, is to add planters
But
all along that front.
I'd like to see, like, there's a pot right here in the photo. I'd like to see like a formal planter, not, hey, we're just putting out a flower pot.
You don't want to see just one flower pot there, right?
They're not, you know, you can't put it on just one side. That's just wrong. You
You're
have
looking
good
sort of like,
symmetry.
not, so,
I'd be willing to waive site plan review if you come up with a landscaping plan for us that we can approve.
well, I
Oh,
mean,
informal, I mean, you're handwritten something.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean-
We can
fine,
put it to
just-
the decision,
okay.
yeah.
So what I would say is that we make a motion to waive site plan review and to have the planner work with the applicant or the landowner or the tenant to devise, a landscaping or a cleanup plan or something to that effect.
boxes.
Yeah, a window box.
That's exactly what was
We-
proposed,
We don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
create a burden, but,
That would be nice. That would be
some little benign sort of thing. So would somebody like to make that motion?
Let's do that.
Are you going to paint it?
Well, one was, I think we have to make a motion for the parking.
If we waive site plan review, that's all we really need to do, right?
and a determination that there's adequate on-street
Oh,
parking
and
to
that
satisfy
there is
the
adequate ones.
spaces.
I think we can do
Right.
both in a single motion. So I
I'll
add that
make
to
a
the.
motion that we waive site plan review and determine that the 3 parking spaces on site with a handicap spot and the 19 parking spaces on Water Street or in a business across the way when they're closed are sufficient. We'll strike that part.
Yeah, well, the
know,
is
but-
sufficient and direct the
Yep,
planner
planner
to work with the
applicant.
applicant to.
Develop a landscape.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, yeah. So what's this other one?
So the other one, I asked the applicant for additional information in terms of laying out the parking area that she,
Table till next meeting?
table.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So is there anything else we have to talk about?
Planning board meeting schedule for next year
Oh, location.
and location, so
Location, this is not going to be available after December. Why? Because of the construction. They're not touching this, but it's just you can't get.
I thought we talked about the new school building, the school
That's-
administration.
That's where we're going to go.
I think we talked about
Yeah. So if everybody's okay with that, that's, that would be good. They could carve out a little room for us.
Separate room.
They do.
Yeah.
It's glassed in, so it's.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So, so let's, if you could tell Laurie, I'll probably do the same because I exchanged messages with her today, but if you could tell her, just in case I forget.
when I submit the schedule, once you approve it, I'll ask her to book it in
Yeah.
at that time.
Right.
So next year's schedule, Joyce told me that Tuesday, May 10th is slotted for annual town meeting. So that was usually the third Tuesday, that's the second. So,
We're going to have to have 3 meetings.
so I've kept it as a,
Sorry,
I've kept it as a
maybe take
meeting.
the week off before, yeah.
Yeah, as you get closer, if the agenda isn't full, the 17th may be canceled, but I've left it on just so that's a placeholder before the town meeting. I've also, this year, you did not hold a meeting when it was National Night Out, so I've put it in again to not have a meeting on that night. And there is an election scheduled,
Yeah, it's a presidential election.
yes, so I have booked that as no meeting as well, and I did not do a replacement meeting,
That's fine.
so.
What about should be a primary in there too, shouldn't there?
I Broadwood Joyce is on the table right now, and that's the date she gave me.
September 20th. That's what they have on,
Yeah. Okay, so do we have to do anything?
September 20th.
That
Nope,
sounds
as long
good.
as you're fine,
Okay.
I'm good.
Good.
I'll turn it in.
Do we want to do minutes
I
and
have not read
seconds?
the minutes, so. if
Let's
you-
hold 'em over.
If you can table them, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.